So, get this, our MC is a third prince, but he's the only one who gets blessed with a totally unique skill that his brothers could only dream of having. His family's reputation for being the world's best swordsman is legendary, but let's be real, magic is still seen as the superior power. So, our guy decided why not both? He can now manipulate mana within his body by using a crazy technique called the mana method. He picked up this skill after blacking out in some wild cave where a faceless spirit forced him into a fight to earn it, and the results are absolutely cracked. With just one swing, he can now literally shatter his foe's blade, all while using mana-charged attacks. Dude can now blow through any defense, and with this newfound power, he might actually have a shot at saving his kingdom. He needs to stop the empire that completely wrecked it in his previous life. And man, what a backstory that was. The last prince of the now destroyed Briole kingdom was just looking for a way to finally end his miserable existence when some shadowy figure found him in a half-dead state. The figure even threw shade at him for his tragic situation, especially since he was the one who caused his kingdom to fall. 10 years prior, he was completely addicted to gambling, winning every single game and getting totally lost in the thrill of it. He was so hooked that he blew off his family's trusted mage, who told him to leave, but his opponent started calling him a cheater, which made the prince get super tilted. He got so mad he just flipped the entire but instead of chilling out, he flexed hard, revealing he was the third prince of the Briole kingdom, right before he took out the men who challenged him. A little later that night, he had a meetup with Yekaterina Ivanovna Granzine, who just happens to be the empire's princess. She was already mad at him for showing up late, and his weak excuses just made everything way worse. Bruh had zero chill, and really ticked her off, and in the confusion, she threw the necklace he gifted her right onto the floor. Yekaterina straight up told him to never contact her again, leaving our prince wondering how he could possibly make things right. But here's the kicker, neither of them knew a spy was listening in on their whole argument. By the next morning, that spy had already made his move, and the relationship between the empire and the Briole kingdom completely imploded. Tensions between the two nations kept rising until the whole situation was a ticking time bomb. Then one day, all hell broke loose for the Briole kingdom when a surprise invasion hit them out of nowhere. He watched as the gates were turned to ash, and just like that, the war was officially on. This brutal war dragged on for years, a relentless meat grinder that claimed countless lives, and right when things were at their worst, the continent's most feared man, Fiore Briole just vanished without a trace. With him gone, the entire dynamic of the war shifted, putting the empire in a massive position of power. As the war raged on, Yuri started to convince himself that it had to be the empire's Princess Yekaterina. He was certain she was the one who betrayed him by leaking top-secret intel. The second his father was out of the picture, the empire launched their full-scale assault. At first, Yuri didn't want to believe it. He hoped the princess wasn't the reason his family was getting slaughtered. But that all changed when he got an apology letter from her. Reading that just sent his emotions spiraling deeper into a black hole of despair. The war didn't stop, and he fought like a cornered animal, cutting down anyone who got in his way. But he was running on fumes and completely boxed in. More of the empire's knights closed in on him. Yuri had already made peace with his death and was ready for the end, but a brave knight jumped in to save him. The knight used his own body as a shield to block the lethal blow. This dude Laurent made his final duty to ensure the prince had a chance to get away. Even though Yuri desperately wanted to help him, he had to swallow his pride and book it for the future of his kingdom. A few days went by and the empire was still hunting him down, while Yuri was holed up in a temporary shelter. But it was obvious he wouldn't survive much longer. At this stage, pure hopelessness had taken over, and he accepted the grim truth. He was sure that his father had been assassinated by now, and right then, one of the empire's knights finally tracked him down. But this wasn't the end of his family line. He begged the knight to spare him, pleading for him to let him live for his family's honor. The knight, instead of finishing the job, said that the empire would eventually have to face the music for what it had done. He warned the last prince to run because more soldiers were on their way. So, Yuri ran for his life again, betting it all on the slim chance that he could one day get his revenge. But in the end, everyone he cared about was already 6 feet up. He knew it was only a matter of time before his own number was up, and that one day, a knight would show up to take his life too, which brings us right back to this moment. He's face to face with a mysterious figure cloaked in darkness. This dude straight up tells Yuri that the sweet release of death is something he absolutely doesn't deserve. Pinning all the blame on him for everyone's demise, the shadowy figure finally shows his face. What's revealed is a warrior who looks like he crawled straight out of hell. Bruh, this guy is actually Laurent. The one man who literally died to protect him is now here to end Yuri Briole, the guy who let his own kingdom fall. His former protector's blade sinks deep into Yuri's chest. But what hits different isn't the pain of dying. It's the crushing weight of guilt Yuri feels in his last moments. It's a wave of despair so deep you couldn't even measure it. The last thing echoing in his mind are his father's words telling him to never lose his honor. As his world fades to black the next time he opens his eyes, he's not in the same place anymore. Yuri Briol jolts awake completely shook, but this time he's a little kid getting an earful from his father. Turns out the kid was knocked out for 3 solid days, and his worried dad has been watching over him the entire time. Way too much is happening all at once for him to process. Yuri can't wrap his head around how in the world his dad is still breathing, or why he's even here in the first place. Overwhelmed by despair, the boy breaks down mourning his father's death right after his own. Of course, the head of the Brielle family has absolutely no idea what his son is rambling about. Yuri just grabs his father's hand, admitting that this ending isn't totally out of left field. He calls his dad out, saying that even though he was always talking about honor, he had his own skeletons in the closet. His dad, thinking his son's nonsense is just getting crazier, smacks the kid upside the head so hard it rattles his brain. That heavy-handed smack is enough to bring the kid to tears. He wonders why his dad still has zero chill with his hands even in the afterlife, because Yuri is fully convinced that both of them are currently chilling in hell. But then a single leaf floats by the window and completely shatters his reality. He glances outside at the gorgeous scenery as a mind-blowing realization finally sinks in: this ain't hell. No cap hell can't be this beautiful, or filled with people who are so full of life. If this were the underworld, there'd be other sinners wandering around, and demons would be roasting Yuri for the train wreck his life became. After all, he was the one responsible for his kingdom's downfall. The truth slowly starts to creep in as he looks at his very much alive father and brothers. Suddenly, the kid's vision gets blurry again, and he just collapses on the spot. His family freaks out, all screaming his name in panic. The truth is, at this very moment, the third prince of the Brielle kingdom has time-traveled back to his 13-year-old body. Let's get inside his head for a second. Yuri honestly thought this whole thing was just a crazy dream, or maybe some kind of intense deja vu hitting him right at the end. But no matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't snap out of it. On top of that, the world hadn't ended like he remembered. Life was just going on like normal. And all these memories he'd long forgotten were suddenly rushing back to him as he sat there having a regular family dinner. He finally accepts the unbelievable truth of his situation. He has actually gone back in time. He's back in the spring when he turned 13 years old. It's a second chance, a do-over to fix everything he screwed up. The next morning, even after he specifically asked Yuri to wake him up, our boy is still out cold, and when he finally snaps awake, it's pure panic and shock. It hits him that he's supposed to be at his sword training class right now, so he starts rushing his preparations like a madman. He's basically shouting at Ina to get all his gear ready while he tries to wash up. The kid is in such a frenzy that even his maid Ina thinks he needs to take a massive chill pill. She suggests they take it down a notch, offering to help him wash his face first. But seeing her alive and well again, well, that's a different story. It triggers some seriously traumatic memories, because in the original timeline, he found Ina brutally murdered along with everyone else. The ice-cold memory of her death still has him seething with frustration. Turning to face her, Yuri makes a request that is completely out of left field. He wants his maid to slap the living daylights out of him, and Ina is just speechless because her entire job is to serve him. Her purpose is to keep him safe, so hitting him would be the exact opposite of her duties. For a servant, that's a serious crime, no cap. But Yuri argues that since it's a direct order from him, it's totally okay, but the maid is still worried and asks if he's absolutely sure. The ever-so-confident Yuri is right in the middle of talking his game when a massive smack connects with his face. It was so loud that it literally sent the birds outside scattering in fear. Low-key, imagine the comedy if she accidentally one-shot the MC right then and there, the series would just end. The scene jumps forward to the training grounds, and yep, Yuri's face is puffed up like he got into a fight with a beehive. He completely forgot that Ina was actually built different and packed a serious punch. As he's trying to practice his sword swings, even the onlookers are cracking up at how busted he looks. Instead of anyone offering him some ice for that swelling, my guy has the whole squad just clowning on him. The absolute funniest part is that his sword instructor Bernard doesn't even bat an eye at his swollen face. Today our boy notices something odd. His teacher isn't saying a word about his sloppy stance or his terrible footwork. He just lets Yuri spar with him, offering zero advice or corrections. It makes Yuri wonder how this dude even landed a teaching gig in the first place. That's when the third prince remembers a conversation he overheard between Bernard and his father. The sword instructor was basically ranting about what a waste of potential Yuri was. He said the kid had insane talent but just wasn't serious about his training at all. If he actually tried, he had all the fundamentals to become the kingdom's greatest warrior. Turns out Bernard is a genuinely great teacher. It was just Yuri being such a garbage student. That's what pushed Bernard into just going through the motions. In his first life, the young prince didn't care about that meeting, and just got even lazier. The current Yuri is absolutely kicking himself, because now he understands just how badly he messed up back then. So this time, Yuri looks his teacher dead in the eye and tells him that from this day forward, he's going to learn for real. He is officially ready to give it his all in every single training session. A smile spreads across the sword teacher's face as he wonders what suddenly lit a fire under the kid. But he's glad to hear it, and a thrilling blue aura begins to explode from his body. Bernard declares that the boy's real training is about to begin, and with that he moves at an insane speed, his blade crashing against the young masters. Realizing he might not have been super clear with his words, Yuri quickly tries to stop the dude before he gets sent to the Shadow Realm. Bernard casually returns to his spot, leaving our boy with a look of pure horror on his face. He was so hyped up earlier that he completely forgot about one tiny but monumentally important detail. The man currently radiating a killer blue aura and walking toward him was once feared across the land as the Sword Demon before he started serving the kingdom. And yeah, that realization just about makes Yuri wet his pants. You can literally see the fear pooling in his eyes after one hell of a training session. The kid collapses onto the ground, utterly defeated and completely out of gas. Our boy just got a taste of what real training actually feels like, and that's the only reason he could even keep up. The only reason he could even stand up to his instructor was thanks to all that mercenary muscle memory from his first life. And even though the training is pure agony, Yuri's low-key finding a silver lining. No cap, it made him want to just end it all. But hey, at least his skills are leveling up at a ridiculous speed. What really hits different, though, is Bernard's reaction. He's completely bugging out, unable to process how the young prince just parried every single one of his moves. Yuri's growth spurt in the middle of their spar was straight up supernatural. But right then their session gets cut short. Ina throws the door open totally out of breath, telling the young master he's got to come with her like right now. Both Yuri and Bernard are shook when they find out the king himself is summoning his son. When our boy asks why everyone's in such a panic, he gets the lowdown. Count Johannes has shown up with his kid for a meet and greet. And get this, Count Johannes' son is the exact same snake who sold out the Brielle kingdom in the original timeline. He's the one who literally opened the front door for the Empire's invasion. Got Barkvar is a traitorous piece of trash, and now he's back to haunt Yuri. Turning to his maid, Yuri's voice drops to absolute zero as he asks exactly where he can find that scumbag. Cut to the next scene where the royal family is having a totally normal, not at all tense dinner with their new guests. Noticing how composed the third prince is acting, Count Johannes is genuinely surprised, even throwing out a compliment about the boy's solid build. The king totally agrees, wondering if Yuri has been trying some new superfood or something. Count Johannes plays along, joking that they should share some with his own son Got. The king then returns the favor, praising how smart Got is. But apparently his own dad doesn't see it that way, firing back that his son is lacking in like a lot of ways. Speaking of Got, the dude seems to be absolutely starstruck by Yuri's brother, basically fangirling over him. As for our MC, he's just staring daggers into Got's soul, which makes the little traitor nervously look away. Yuri's other brother picks up on this vibe, wondering if there's some beef between these two he doesn't know about. You can practically feel the awkward friction between them. And the funniest part is our boy, who just casually admits, "Oh yeah, that kid stabbed me in the back." Hearing that, his brother immediately starts roasting Yuri for letting someone like that just walk around. I mean, especially after getting betrayed on that level. He's not wrong, to be fair. It's obvious Yuri has a major bone to pick with Got, pointing out how the kid just cosplays as a high and mighty noble. But deep down, he's just a total punk. Got's expression hasn't changed one bit. Now getting majorly ticked off, he shoots back a furious glare. But instead of popping off, our boy decides to keep his cool. He reminds himself to play this smart. There's absolutely no way he's letting this clown wreck the kingdom of Brielle a second time, or make the same mistakes he did in his past life. On that note, Yuri also recalls fighting him around this same time in the original timeline, though it was just a petty argument back then. Still, that small clash could have been the spark that eventually led Got to betray the entire kingdom. Later, they all head out to the training grounds. Yuri immediately tosses Got a wooden sword, acknowledging that he knows the kid can handle one. The little dude tries to downplay his own skills, but our MC cuts him off, reminding him their kingdom isn't exactly famous for producing weak, small-minded knights. Got has no clue what he's talking about, since he's a long way from ever being a real knight. Yuri just lays it out for him, saying it's his destiny to become a knight one day. There's no running from what's coming, and while the little shrimp is trying to come up with a comeback, Yuri launches himself forward at full throttle. And just like that, the duel is on. Rocking the most OP weapon in existence, the legendary twig, our boy smacks it right against Got's blade. Got starts crying about a sneak attack calling him a coward, but our MC isn't even fazed and is about to show off some next-level battle, IQ. He pulls a classic move kicking a face full of dirt at his opponent, completely blinding God and opening him up for a beatdown. This annoying kid, now totally done being played with, starts lecturing Yuri about the honorable code of knights, but what Yuri does next is gonna leave him shook. Bruh just straight up yeets his sword to the ground, which is the universal language for, I don't even need this to clap you. These hands are all I need for the job. He then launches forward with some serious BDE. Yuri delivers a kick that absolutely sends the kid flying, knocking him flat on his back. And here I was thinking you couldn't slap someone with your foot. With his all-powerful wooden stick of doom in hand, he declares his W over Got Barkvar. He can't help but remember that this is the same kid who grows up to be a traitor, selling out his family's name to suck up to the Empire. So, Yuri looks Got dead in the eye and tells him his dad is a legit legend, a highly respected knight throughout the kingdom. You don't just get a rep like that for nothing, and that legacy could be his someday. As Yuri offers him a hand to get up, he thinks about how everyone has that drive to survive, but man, he just can't stomach it when one of his future knights is as spineless as Got. In this timeline, he's making sure there are no weak links on his team, and that includes himself. He asks Got again, challenging him to think about why his father even became a count to begin with. He tells Got not to answer now, but to keep that question in mind anytime he's backed into a corner. Things seem to end on a good note as Got takes off. Meanwhile, Yuri's brother is completely floored that he actually won that fight. He even admits with zero chill that he was low-key rooting for Got to win. Sounds harsh, I know, but you gotta remember right now, Yuri's reputation is basically that of a lazy, good-for-nothing, noble kid. Anyway, our boy gets a little salty about it, but his brother's quick to remind him that the whole kingdom knows the third prince as a total problem child and a gambling addict. So it's not like he's wrong, no cap. Pissed off, Yuri announces he's turning over a new leaf and tells his brother to drop the act. He's had enough of the teasing, and seeing the absolute shocked Pikachu face on his bro is priceless. Yuri just smirks, enjoying how his brother can't figure out what the hell's gotten into him. A few days go by. The brutal training sessions with Bernard are still going strong, and by evening our MC is completely gassed. Now that his sword skills are in motion, the instructor suggests it's time to start teaching him about a mana method as well. Yuri's eyes light up, asking if he's about to learn Bernard's secret personal mana technique. But his teacher shuts that down real quick, telling him he's nowhere near ready for something that advanced. Instead, he's adamant that Yuri should learn the official Briole family method first. Yuri isn't sure why, but Bernard hypes up the family method as being super balanced and efficient. Now, here's the kicker. Our boy already maxed out the Briole method in his past life, so relearning it is pointless for getting stronger, especially since he already hit its absolute ceiling, back when he was a mercenary. Noticing his frustrated look, the instructor wonders if the third prince had a different plan. Our MC thinks it over for a second and then makes up his mind. He asks his teacher to recommend a solid instructor from the Royal Guard to train him instead. This person doesn't have to be the most skilled fighter, they just need to have a deep well of raw talent he can learn from. Because even with all his experience from his past life as a merc, there's this one technique Yuri could never get a hold of, and hearing the word potential really gets the gears turning. The respected instructor strokes his chin and gets lost in thought. And finally an answer pops into his head. It's Jared, the one dude with more raw potential than anyone else. Just hearing that name again sends a tidal wave of memories crashing over Yuri. He ran into the guy during the hellscape of a war in his past life, but back then Jared didn't really seem like anything special. Not even a little bit. In fact, you could honestly call him kinda pathetic. It was a low-key miracle he even survived the war. Despite being a total liability, he still complained to Yuri. But even our boy knows that Jared had to have been born with some kind of monstrous talent, but reality just hits different. Because he was lazy, he never bothered to actually train or sharpen his skills, so he completely failed to level up. By the time the war actually started, he was just a sobbing wreck, and it was Yuri who had to give him a pep talk. Both of them were just wasted potential by the time the war dropped on them. Like a freight train, and yes, I do mean the legendary Truck-kun. Anyway, back to the present. Our boy is feeling optimistic, so he decides to go meet Jared in person, dubbing him his potential trump card. Speaking of the man he's supposed to be training right now, and Yuri hopes to flip a switch in his head to make sure he doesn't fumble the bag. So, in the very next scene, he pulls up to the Royal Guard Training Academy to meet Jared. Seeing the young master arrive out of the blue, the senior knight is totally shocked and asks what brings him here. Yuri just says he came to check in on them and to see how hard the knights were grinding every single day. Our boy takes a look for himself and spots all the trainees locked in combat. They're all facing each other with some serious intensity, but he specifically asks for Jared, who seems to be MIA. Following his request, the senior knight points over to where the rookie is. Just seeing the state he's in, our boy lets out an annoyed sigh. He finally understands why Bernard acted that way before. From the looks of it, Jared's version of training is a complete joke, especially compared to what the other fighters are doing. Normally, you're supposed to be pushing your limits and going all out in your training. But this dude is doing the absolute bare minimum, not even really using his skills. Seeing him like this, it's no surprise he becomes a washed-up has-been in the dark future. Yuri asks the senior knight Sir Rosso to get him a wooden sword, since he's interested in jumping in for a quick sparring match. Rosso is totally hyped and asks the third prince which opponent he's going to choose for the session. As you've probably already guessed, Yuri points straight at the slacker and asks for a match. A little while later, the arena goes quiet. The other trainees are taking 5, while Jared faces his opponent, the young master of the Brielle Kingdom. His buddies are cheering him on, hoping Jared will put on a good show, even though Jared himself just looks completely annoyed, like he would rather be anywhere else but here. Yuri addresses him head-on, saying he has heard about his incredible potential as a knight, and that's why he came here personally. He wants to test those skills for himself. Yuri needs to know what Jared is really made of. Looking pretty nervous, the guy accepts the purpose of the duel. The fight kicks off with our boy lunging forward immediately on the offensive, hoping to be impressed. Jared just waits, showing zero fear or worry. He effortlessly deflects Yuri's swing with his own. Even though the young master is the one bringing the heat, his opponent's movements are perfectly calculated with every single step. It's so clean that Jared's peers are just blown away as the fight goes on. The trainees also notice that the third prince is doing exceptionally well, considering his size and experience. But something about the fight itself makes the slacker wonder what's really going on. Yuri strikes him again, forcing the man into a defensive block. He can sense that the rhythm of Yuri's attacks isn't just for show. It's all deliberate, a clear effort to perfectly match his own pace. Suddenly, the battle is getting pretty boring, because so far Yuri has only been mirroring the exact energy he's getting from the knight, basically challenging him to finally go ballistic. And to really take charge of the fight, our boy slams his sword down so hard, it practically sends Jared gasping for air. But that's not even the wildest part. The fact that the rookie knight was still able to parry the attack, well, it just shows you this dude is built different. Yuri has to admit his opponent's reflexes are on another level. But he's not finished yet, shoving Jared back with a huge swing. The whole vibe of the fight starts to shift, and Yuri's attacks are suddenly hitting different than before. Jared finally stops taking it easy on the young master and starts throwing hands for real with every single strike. Now on the defensive, Yuri figures this was pretty much inevitable, even with all his experience from a past life. It doesn't change the reality that Jared is a powerhouse of a knight. A victory was never really in the cards. And yet, our boy still has one final trick hidden up his sleeve. Taking his opponent by complete surprise, Yuri whips his blade in an upward strike, forcing Jared's sword into such a recoil that it creates a clean opening. With a smile, the third prince basically says he's about to land a solid hit. He doesn't even care if he ends up losing this match. And that's exactly what he does, blazing forward with a slicing motion and cutting past the knight for a confirmed hit. As he celebrates landing the blow, the other trainees are just speechless. The third prince's insane technique scored a clean hit on Jared, and they're all hyping him up for it. But the fight isn't over yet, as the young master readies his sword, asking if Jared is still trying to hold back on him. Instead of getting arrogant, the knight is just lost in his own confusion. He thought he was in total control of this fight. But with every move Yuri makes, it feels like he's the one being backed into a corner. A fired-up Jared rushes in again and almost gets tagged. The third prince just eggs him on to try harder, which really starts to get on the talented knight's nerves. In his anger, he actually coats his weapon using a mana method technique. His use of this power has Sir Rosso and the others yelling at him for daring to use such a dangerous ability on the young master. But this man has zero chill left. His blade is pulsing with a powerful aura as it zips right past the third prince's neck. If Yuri hadn't been on his toes there, no cap, he would have been seriously messed up. Jared's blinding rage instantly turns into complete despair. That last attack wasn't a clean miss. It actually sheared off a few strands of hair from the young master's head. It even left a scratch. The realization of what he just did hits him, and Jared gets chewed out for being a lunatic who actually attacked the prince. While Russo is panicking and asking about Yuri's condition, our boy, instead of making a big deal out of it, just thinks it's what happens in a spar and slaps a bandage on his bleeding scratch. Then he tells the knight to pick his weapon back up, because their fight has only just begun. Leaping into action, Yuri goes on the offensive again, and as their blades clash, the third prince seems genuinely amused. He's swiftly overwhelming his opponent with each and every strike. This side of the prince is something not even the knight knew existed, and the rookie starts comparing himself to the third prince's current state of mind. One of them was low-key just going through the motions during training, while the other is giving it his all to prove a point. Not only that, but Yuri is actually entertained instead of feeling cornered. As he clashes with Jared again and again, it's not just that the young master is going all out, but he's positioning himself to push even harder with every single attack. The duel reaches a stalemate, but Jared is finding it impossible to keep his cool. He is in an absolute state of rage. He's never felt this kind of passion and fury before, not even when he was up against opponents who were way stronger. Meanwhile, our boy is looking majestic as hell, with those blue eyes as he shuts down Jared's advance. The knight just can't wrap his head around how the young prince is pushing him to such limits. Speaking of which, Yuri bursts forward and unleashes yet another horizontal swing. His opponent ducks under it, but it's safe to say Yuri got his payback for the haircut as he slices off a few strands of Jared's hair in return. With immense power, the knight grips his blade and brings it crashing down on the prince. He must be channeling mana or something, because his sword literally cracks and shatters Yuri's own blade into pieces. The duel comes to a close with a decisive winner. But instead of being salty about his loss, our boy stays completely chill and even smiles at his opponent. Jared's powerful aura fades away, and he's left gasping for air after putting so much energy into that fight. The young prince just offers the knight a hand. He even says that he learned a great deal from their battle. Jared is looking a little nervous, but he gives the prince props for his skills as they shake hands. The knight is thinking to himself that his opponent's drive and fighting spirit were on another level, something he never expected from the young prince. This kid is built different, a total beast. While he's lost in his own head, he totally spaces on the fact that he's still holding Yuri's hand. The kid calls him out, asking why on earth the knight is playing it so cool after everything. He was, after all, the one who gave the prince a head injury, but Jared just runs off with his tail between his legs. That fight wasn't a walk in the park for our protagonist either. The second he gets a chance, he just collapses on the floor, totally exhausted. All the knights are going wild, cheering for Yuri's absolutely insane performance. As they're all celebrating, the captain of the knights, who Loki looks like Bernard, rolls up. He shows up and immediately spots the young prince recovering from the aftermath of his duel. This guy is signed captain of the Royal Guard of Briole, and it looks like our boy just caught his interest. The scene jumps to a couple of days after that whole incident. We see Jared walking home after his shift when a familiar voice stops him. Bruh, it's the third prince, and he's just been waiting there for him. Yuri tells the knight to follow him because they have to go somewhere important. But instead of just obeying, Jared actually brings up his training, pointing out he'll miss it if he goes. Yuri notes this is a pretty huge change since it proves Jared is actually starting to care about his own abilities. At the same time, the third prince basically says he's the one who made it happen, so just for once, Jared needs to follow his lead. The knight gives in and accepts the order. It's not like he can really turn down the young prince anyway. Meanwhile, our boy is pretty satisfied with the knight's current attitude. They've still got a lot to work on, but this is a decent start. Getting curious, the knight asks where they're headed, to which Yuri pretty much tells him to shut it and keep walking. Jared is getting nervous that the prince might be about to cause some chaos, but our boy reassures him that nothing like that is going to happen. Since they aren't on this little journey alone, the knight asks about the others with them. Yuri just yells at the guy up ahead of them, who turns out to be their family's court mage, Hernando. The mage is completely startled by the young master's sudden shout. The kid doesn't waste any time saying he has to go somewhere and needs the mage to help him out. Hernando is not having it and quickly tries to shoot him down. That is, until our boy hits him where it hurts, pointing out the mage has a mountain of gambling debt that could be wiped out in a second. Stunned, the mage turns back to check if the young master's being for real. The prince gives his word that he'll pay off the entire thing. And it's no cap either, since Yuri is known for never lying, unless he's in a gambling den. Hernando basically vouches for our boy's honesty. Yuri's feeling pretty hyped until reality slaps him in the face, when Hernando clarifies that the only time he's ever seen him is lying his ass off inside a gambling den. So, it doesn't exactly make him look good, but Yuri insists he'll pay the debt, so the mage needs to tag along. Finally deciding to give in to the request, Hernando pulls out a whole-ass contract for him to sign, just to make sure he isn't getting played. Yuri looks absolutely devastated, as our boy realizes his title as the third prince is pretty much useless in this world model. The hilarious part? He pins all the damages on Jared's tab, basically telling the knight he's gotta do what he says. At first glance, it totally looks like poor Jared is getting thrown under the bus here. But low-key, this is just Yuri's big brain move to sidestep the contract entirely. He needs the knight to be his star witness for their verbal deal. With their handshake agreement in place, Hernando is all set to bounce. But he's still got zero clue where the heck they're actually headed. I mean, if the young prince is dragging a knight and a mage this far out, then you know the situation's gotta be serious. Finally, Yuri spills the beans on their mission. They're making a beeline for Sword Mountain. The mage is completely lost and doesn't get the point, until the prince flashes a grin and announces they're about to go raid his ancestor's dungeon. As they trek through this ancient forgotten tunnel, with Jared taking point, Hernando mentions he never would have imagined that a secret path like this was hiding right under the royal palace this whole time. Jared glances back and asks Yuri what they're going to find at the end of this massive cave. And the prince just shrugs it off like it's nothing, casually saying it opens up at Sword Mountain. This completely floors the knight, who's like, "Wait, you mean the legendary one from all the old tales?" After a quick pause, Yuri just nods, confirming it's the real deal. Then he gets lost in thought, remembering how his past life went totally sideways. When the founder's legacy was discovered right after the Empire steamrolled Brielle, while he was escaping all that madness, he remembers seeing a headline about a dungeon being found inside Sword Mountain. Back then, though, he only used this tunnel for a quick getaway, and that so-called legacy fell right into the greedy clutches of the Empire. But he's not the same guy from his past life who was just trying to stay alive. This time, our boy is laser-focused on getting the truth, and there's no turning back. He's completely locked in. He's determined to see for himself what kind of inheritance his ancestors actually left behind. A moment later, we cut to a vibrant, green forest that looks like it was pulled straight from some fantasy movie. And we see Yuri shoving open these massive rust-covered doors at the end of the tunnel. The crew steps out into the open forest as Hernando scopes out the surroundings, asking if this is really where Sword Mountain starts. Then he changes the subject, wondering how Yuri even managed to get the key in the first place. Meanwhile, the prince is quietly remembering that same as last time, it was just sitting in his study the whole time. He just didn't realize how important it was back then, a mistake that cost him big time. But he just tells the mage to quit being so nosy and to drop it. And then right on cue, he cries out in pain when a sharp thorn jabs him in the palm. Yuri warns him that the leaves around here are basically razors, so he better watch himself and just follow his lead. As they make their way deeper into the woods, Hernando whispers to Jared, joking that maybe the prince took a knock to the head recently because he's been acting super strange. The knight couldn't agree more, but before they can get any deeper into their gossip session, Yuri shouts from up ahead, telling the two slowpokes to get a move on, proving he's still the same bossy dude he's always been. Suddenly, Yuri's senses go on high alert. He spots something in the distance and immediately signals for the other two to freeze. He tells them not to make a single sound. He points out a huge pack of dire wolves just ahead, and they look like they're ready to turn our boys into a midday snack. He whispers that they travel in packs, so there could be more lurking around. Jared is obviously shocked that the so-called failure of a prince actually knows his stuff. Yuri just calmly says he read it in a book, and Hernando almost faints at the thought. Just picturing Yuri picking up a book is enough to break his brain. Yuri adds that the wolves haven't noticed them yet, so the game plan is to tiptoe past them without being heard. But of course, the universe had other ideas. Because as Hernando takes a step back, he somehow manages to find the one single twig in the whole forest and steps right on it, making a loud snap. The sound is so loud it nearly gives everyone a collective heart attack. Trying to play it cool, he spits out a shaky apology while basically sweating buckets, only for a dire wolf to drop in from the sky, ready to make him a snack. Jared loses his cool and sprints to help, screaming Hernando's name. He unleashes a massive sword swing that takes the wolf's head clean off in one swift savage move, and the body crumples to the ground. Yuri gives Jared a nod of approval for juicing his swing with mana, saying their hides are basically as tough as steel, but unfortunately, that sick move totally backfires, because the pack's alpha, who's built like a tank, glares straight at Jared. The massive beast lets out a terrifying howl, and in a flash, the crew is completely boxed in by the whole pack. Jared's knuckles turn white as he clutches his sword. He tells the other guys to stay on him, while he tries to power up his mana again, but the wolves are already salivating, like they've just stumbled upon a 5-star buffet. They all charge in at once, but Jared is having none of it. He gives them the death stare and carves a path straight through the horde without even breaking a sweat. Hernando is impressed, commenting on the knight's six-sword skills, and even Yuri agrees, though he low-key thinks Jared is still a total noob, as he watches Jared somehow fend them all off. But Jared's starting to get overwhelmed by the sheer numbers, so Yuri finally tells Hernando to quit spectating and actually use some of his epic skills. You know, the ones his dad never shuts up about. This lights a fire under Hernando, who jokes that the prince is making his battle mage work overtime. While he casually conjures up like 100 fireballs, Jared throws a confused look back, asking what the heck he's talking about, but his focus immediately snaps back to the fight when he sees a fireball screaming right toward him. He dodges just in the nick of time, tumbling back as the spell goes boom, and completely deletes the wolves in a huge blast that leaves nothing but a crater behind. After what feels like forever and fighting through hordes of monsters, the team finally makes it to the very top of the mountain. Jared's totally gassed, trying to catch his breath, and looking salty as hell about the non-stop fighting. The gang chills near the cliff's edge, just taking in the insane view. Jared scans the empty landscape and asks if they are even in the right spot. But our boy is already locked in, saying with absolute certainty that this is it before he starts searching the area. After peeking behind a huge rock, he spots a glint of something shiny buried in the dirt, and his eyes light up like he just found a PS6 under the Christmas tree. Without a second thought, Yuri immediately starts digging it out, but Jared rushes over to tell him a prince shouldn't be doing manual labor, and he tries to get Hernando to help instead. But the bougie mage looks absolutely disgusted, claiming that getting his hands dirty is way below his pay grade, and a total embarrassment for a magic user. A little later, they finally unearth the object, and Yuri pulls a whole sword from the ground, as Yuri gawks at the sick-looking blade with a sparkle in his eye. Hernando goes full-on Sherlock Holmes. He points out that it doesn't really look ancient at all, almost like somebody just dropped it off here not too long ago. Yuri squints and notices something etched into the base of the blade, the word guilty. Abertur. Jared walks up and wonders aloud if this could be the legendary family heirloom, but Yuri isn't convinced and keeps on examining the weird sword. All of a sudden, the ground starts shaking violently, which freaks everyone out, but Yuri just smirks and says, "This is the perfect way to test it out." The earth literally cracks open under their feet, and Jared starts screaming like the main character in a horror flick as the entire crew plummets into the dark chasm. The Royal Knight continues his high-pitched shrieking all the way down until he faceplants hard in front of a creepy-looking tunnel. Yuri jolts awake to find himself on top of Jared, realizing the knight totally used his body to cushion the fall. He starts to get off as Jared whines about how much everything hurts like a grandpa with a bad back. Yuri quickly deduces that he must have used mana to buff his body for the impact, and admits that no cap. It was pretty slick. But the compliment is wasted, because the knight passes out cold from sheer exhaustion. Moments later, Hernando gently floats down like some kind of magic nanny on a chill vacation, and casually remarks that the fall was a hell of a lot farther than he thought. Yuri just gives him the nastiest side-eye, muttering about how the guy clearly cared more about saving his own hide than protecting the prince. And Hernando, bless his heart, just starts tripping over his own words, trying to make up some weak excuses. But before he can go into full-on defense mode, a sound from behind makes the battle mage whip around, and he spots something that's pure nightmare fuel. It's creeping down the tunnel, and he desperately tries to warn Yuri. But Yuri's still convinced he's just trying to change the subject. Hernando keeps insisting he's dead serious, finally just yelling that there's a ghost right there. That word finally flips a switch, and Yuri spins around, his chill completely gone. And yup, there it is, an armored figure that looks like it just clawed its way out of a horror movie. It's slowly making its way toward them, just radiating this intense aura of death. Yuri instantly clocks it as a death knight, and locking eyes with the thing, he tells Jared to get his butt up immediately. The dude is still basically in another dimension though, and just lets out a zombie-like groan. But a swift kick to the ribs wakes his soul right up, and he bolts upright. The moment Jared spots the monster, he just gasps. Then in a fit of drama, he throws himself right in front of the prince. He screams that he'll take on the Death Knight, but honestly, Yuri does not look impressed at all. The Death Knight grinds to a halt just inches away from them as Yuri narrows his eyes. He remembers that these things were once regular knights before being brought back way more cracked than they ever were in life. Still, he can tell this one doesn't seem hostile, so he decides to approach it calmly. Jared is clearly thinking this is a terrible idea, but Yuri just hits him with a confident, "Bruh, I know what I'm doing." He explains that it wouldn't make any sense for the founder's personal guards to attack someone from their own bloodline. Staring the knight down, he states his name loud and clear. For a second, the Death Knight just stands there, processing this level of audacity, like its brain is buffering before it suddenly whips out its sword. This move instantly sends the other two into a full-blown panic. But it's way too late. The Death Knight swings its massive blade at the prince, who's too stunned to even flinch. Instead of turning him into confetti, though, the blade just gives him an emergency haircut before slamming into the ground. Hernando absolutely loses it, crying dramatically that the prince just got his head yeeted into the next dimension. Yuri tells him to shut up, but the mage is now mourning the surprise trim. That's when the dusty old skeleton finally decides to speak. It says Yuri has the same arrogant vibe as the last one. As it puts its sword away, Yuri asks who this mysterious figure even is. The Death Knight reveals that he's Eric Briol, and you could hear a pin drop as everyone's jaw hits the floor. Jared just echoes the name in disbelief, while Hernando goes full lore nerd, explaining that this is the one and only Giga Chad. the absolute legend that no one in the Brielle kingdom could ever. This is the guy who conquered the entire continent all by himself. Not only that, he's the founder of the Brielle kingdom and was its very first king. Yuri stands up a little straighter and asks if he's the first person to ever get this far, and the Death Knight confirms it. He then adds that only a true Brielle descendant could ever draw that sword anyway. This confirms what Yuri suspected all along. This sword is the legendary family heirloom his ancestors used. He brings the blade closer to his face for a better look. The Death Knight then casually mentions he used to wield it, which completely kills Yuri's vibe. Our boy is now low-key annoyed, and the Death Knight seems genuinely confused by his reaction. But Yuri just apologizes for taking his stuff. The skeleton drops the formal act and asks Yuri to be straight with him about why he's here. Yuri tightens his grip on the sword as he declares his full name, demanding that the knight hand over the founder's legacy. After a long silent stare, the Death Knight turns toward a glowing crystal and makes a super dramatic announcement. He says the time has finally come to fulfill his duty and that he will grant Yuri what he came for. The prince starts to sweat a little as he follows behind him, while Jared looks like his brain just blue-screened, as he's silently trying to compute all the recent supernatural chaos and realizing this whole royal guard gig isn't exactly what the brochure promised. Yuri snaps him out of his trance by yelling at him, and the knight looks totally rattled. He's getting these trippy flashbacks to a past that shouldn't even exist, scratching his head, and pretty sure he's losing his marbles, but he shouts back that he's on his way and sprints to catch up with the prince. The Death Knight creaks over to the crystal and plops down on its base like his ancient knees finally clocked out for the day. As he strikes a pose and just radiates this insane powerful aura, the crystal suddenly flares up with an intense glow, forcing the whole squad to shield their eyes as the skeleton makes a declaration. He says he really hopes the prince has what it takes. Instantly, Yuri gets yeeted into some barren desert, spinning around in a panic and wondering where in the world he just landed. He spots a figure moving in the distance, and for a hot second he thinks it might be the founder himself. But that hope evaporates fast when he sees the thing isn't even human and is already charging at him full tilt with a nasty-looking sword in its hand. He barely manages to parry the incoming strike, grunting from the sheer force of the blow. Locking his gaze on the glowing blue orb, his eyes go wide as he realizes the creature is wielding a legit mana sword. The transparent fighter then points to the glowing blue sphere embedded right in its chest, which leaves Yuri totally baffled. But it doesn't stop there as the glow starts coursing through its see-through body, and then channels directly into its sword, making the weapon light up too. Yuri keeps his own sword ready, still on high alert, but he's starting to get that what he's witnessing is the actual no-cap method of how to wield mana. His confusion only deepens when the being suddenly gestures at him, and he yells at the thing, asking if it seriously wants him to copy its moves, even though they're supposed to be in the middle of a deathmatch right now. Scratching his head, Yuri mutters that the founder must have been completely off his rocker before he died. The whole idea of throwing someone who has zero clue about the mana method into a real fight to teach them by force sounds like the kind of cracked logic only someone living their second life would cook up. And he comes to a conclusion that maybe that someone is him. Yuri crouches, focusing hard as he channels mana into his own hand and watches it emit a soft glow. He's totally stuck on how to actually apply the technique, but he raises his sword and calls out to the featureless figure, admitting he's still not getting it. He asks for a proper demonstration just one more time and gets a wild grin in return as the being lifts its blade again. In that split second, it hits Yuri that he has no choice but to get stronger, no matter what it takes. He squares off against the warrior, swearing that since the Empire is definitely going to show its true colors and invade Brielle, this time is going to hit different. There's no way he's repeating his past failures, promising to completely annihilate them. This time, even if he has to give up his own life. He clenches his sword quietly, muttering that this must be the legendary swordsmanship of the Ancestor King. Yuri doesn't waste another second, charging in like a lightning bolt and slashing with absolute focus, while he vows to master every single technique thrown his way, kicking off his insane battle against the faceless fighter. Meanwhile, Jared slowly blinks his eyes open, finding himself in a totally alien space, and he looks around completely bewildered. He quickly figures out he's standing in what looks like a training arena. He tries to find any sign of life, but comes up empty, commenting that this place feels way too real to be some kind of dream. He senses something's off and clutches his sword handle, yelling out that whatever's hiding needs to stop being a coward and show itself. From behind him, footsteps approach and he spins around, completely ready for a fight. But he freezes in place when he's face to face with a perfect mirror image of himself. He asks out loud if this is the Death Knight's twisted idea of a test, then calmly asks the copy for its name, and if Jared's even supposed to be in the picture. At last, the clone starts running its mouth, telling him he's an idiot for trying to fight his destiny, which totally catches Jared off guard. The copy smugly asks if he didn't just become a royal guard to get paid and coast through life. It even says he needs to back off from the third prince, warning him that the more he pushes against his fate, the more his life is going to suck. All the while, Jared just narrows his eyes, listening quietly. Taking a deep breath, he looks at his sword and admits that Loki, the old version of him, would have totally agreed with that nonsense. But things are way different now. His mind flashes back to all those training sessions with the prince, and a huge grin spreads across his face as he calls the fake out for being so bitter. Then he starts dropping some serious wisdom. He declares that once a sword is swung, your only job is to think about the next strike, because if you get hung up on what just happened, you're just going to mess yourself up even more. The fake Jared isn't having any of it, firing up his mana sword and calling him arrogant with a sneer. He bolts forward with a quick jab, but our boy Jared blocks it without even breaking a sweat. As their swords connect, Jared instantly figures out the pattern and thinks about how painfully predictable this copy is. This dude takes zero risks, dumping all his stats into defense. The clone leaps into the air, but Jared sees the move coming a mile away, thinking back on what a boring fighter he used to be. He lands a clean shot that sends his double crashing hard to the ground. Jared takes a quick victory breath, but stays on his toes just in case. And good thing too, because the fake starts to melt down into some seriously nasty goo. The real Jared watches like a hawk as it reforms into a giant sludge beast. He knows no cap, the real fight is just getting started. The knight stares down the oversized goo monster and mutters that it's just another loud-mouthed brute. He quietly hopes the prince is doing all right on his end, then readies his sword and braces himself for what's next. He mentally cheers Yuri on to hang tough and pull out a win. Meanwhile, back in that desert wasteland, the ground is completely wrecked from all the fighting. Yuri is laid out in a crater, not moving an inch. The transparent being stands over him, sword at the ready, and approaches with some serious killer intent. Yuri still looks totally spaced out and doesn't react at all, but the faceless warrior doesn't give a damn, raising its sword high into the air. It brings the blade down hard, unleashing a gnarly explosion that shakes the whole battlefield. But just as the see-through figure's sword is about to hit home, Yuri drops the act, gripping his own sword tightly and just flooding it with a ton of mana. He thrusts it directly at the creature. With some insane acrobatic reflexes, the guy manages to bend completely backward to dodge, but the swing still sets off a massive mana explosion. Quick as ever, the faceless fighter hops back a few feet, while Yuri lets out a sharp breath. He finally gets a single second to recover. He can't even tell how long this duel has been going on. He admits that last attack was beyond reckless and stupid, but the way he swung and the way his mana just surged through the blade, especially that feeling of fighting, like his life was on the line with every single clash, that's what made everything finally click into place. Staring at the sword in his hand, which is now pulsing with energy, he can feel he's just had a breakthrough. But before he gets a chance to soak in the power-up, something snags his attention, and he sees the transparent warrior is starting to crack apart. Its sword shatters into countless pieces as its body begins to disintegrate, and Yuri figures it out in an instant. The dude's time is up. Dust starts peeling from its limbs, and just before it completely fades away, it raises a hand for one final wave. The prince watches the remains scatter on the wind, a strange little smile playing on his lips. He shuts his eyes, sending a silent thank you to the mysterious mentor who guided him. Just as his own body starts to fade away, Yuri lets out a groan, slowly cracking his eyes open and blinking away the blurriness. He's totally lost, scanning his surroundings with a confused look on his face. His buddies are starting to stir too, and they all look like they just went through the same wild trip. That's when it hits him, they're back for real. The Death Knight watches them with a smug look, remarking, well, looks like you all had a nice little dream." Yuri's still pretty dazed, but manages to ask what in the world that was. He's told it was all part of the founder's grand design, a little something he cooked up just in case his descendants ever actually managed to find this place. This jogs Yuri's memory. In his past life, the Empire absolutely leveled Sword Mountain. That's probably the reason nobody from the Brielle family ever got their hands on this legacy until now. But Yuri's not done, and asks if the founder himself used this crazy mana technique, but the Death Knight is quick to shut that down. The founder never used it. This was his final gift to the world. After traveling the entire globe, he basically collected every badass skill he could find and mashed them all together into one ultimate technique. And guess what? Yuri is the very first person to ever inherit it. The prince looks deep in thought before questioning why Eric didn't just hand this down to the royal family directly. The skeleton explains that the dungeon is on a cosmic timer, only opening when the moment is perfect. And because it opened right now, it means this power is desperately needed. Yuri presses on, asking what that timing is all about. But the knight completely deflects, saying it's not his place to spill the tea. That's a puzzle Yuri has to solve on his own. His attention snaps back to the sword in front of him, and he asks for its name. The Death Knight reveals it's called Soul Severance. That name really hits different, but before Yuri can get lost in thought, the knight orders him to take a knee. The vibe is intense, like he's receiving a sacred family treasure, and the knight's aura screams zero chill. On pure instinct, Yuri drops to his knees without a second thought. The Death Knight then rests a bony hand on the boy's head and starts to recite the vow. He tells Yuri to never be afraid of his enemies, and the prince responds with a firm, "I won't." Knight continues. He commands him to always follow his beliefs and fulfill the duty of Brielle to the very end, no matter what. Then out of nowhere, the knight yanks Yuri's head back, his grip tightening, and orders him to listen up and burn this next part into his brain. A Brielle never abandons their honor, even if it means dying for it. With that last bombshell, the Death Knight himself starts crumbling into dust. His long-awaited mission was finally complete. His voice echoes one last time, "This is the oath of Brielle," as he fades away, leaving Yuri completely speechless. He can only stare at the spot where the ancient knight used to be. The next morning, his maid busts into the room and yanks open the curtains. She cheerfully announces it's a new day, but all she gets is a groan from under the covers. She asks if he's feeling wiped out. She mentions he got home super late last night and warns him not to even think about lying back down or he'll be out like a light again. Yuri lets out a huge yawn and explains he had to swing by the Royal Archives, which is why he was so late. The maid gets curious and asks what for, and he tells her he was hunting for a specific document. See, while digging through his family's history last night, Yuri found something pretty wild. The records showed that the founder actually had a sibling, a brother who apparently ditched his honor and then just poofed from the history books, completely erased. Staring at the sword now, Yuri puts two and two together. That brother had to be the Death Knight, and this sword must have originally been his. The maid snaps him out of it, reminding him he'd better get dressed because the king is waiting, which makes Yuri's stomach drop to the floor. She adds that she has no idea why, but right after Hernando met with his majesty, the king immediately sent for him. Yuri starts sweating buckets, cursing Hernando under his breath as the memories from the night before come rushing back. He can perfectly picture Hernando's smug face telling him no cap that he was going to report every single thing to the king. Yuri had asked if all that was necessary, but the guy just smirked and basically said, yeah, he felt like it was. Clutching his head, Yuri is totally freaking out, realizing that Hernando has probably snitched on everything by now. A little later, Yuri finds himself standing in the massive royal hall, right under a chandelier that looks like it costs more than a small country. And he lets his pops know that he's here just like he was asked. The king's just sitting there, scratching his head, looking low-key, lost on what to even do with him at this point. He starts off by revealing that Hernando already snitched on him, telling him the whole story. Then he totally chews him out for going AWOL, not to mention how he somehow managed to find the secret dungeon. And on top of that, he walked out with the freaking founder's legacy. Yuri doesn't even try to deny it, admitting it's all facts, but that just seems to piss the king off even more as he gets up. He asks if he actually found the sword down there, and when Yuri says yes, His Majesty starts walking toward him. His voice gets super serious as he mentions that he's been hearing from a lot of people that Yuri has done a complete 180. The king squints his eyes and starts dropping names, listing every single person who told him about Yuri's sudden personality flip. And the last person to drop a dime on him was, of course, Hernando. Placing a hand on his son's head, the king gives him a direct order to start talking. He wants to know what the hell happened that could have possibly sparked this kind of change. Yuri is sweating bullets, holding his sword a little tighter, but he stays completely silent. But his dad isn't backing down and just keeps pushing him for an answer. He asks him straight up if he's refusing to explain himself. Yuri stammers that it's not like that, but the king immediately cuts him off, wondering what the holdup is, and the prince admits he's scared. He points out that His Majesty has been clenching his fists this entire time. Realizing this, the king relaxes his hand and tells him to just spit it out. Yuri finally caves and says it all started with a dream, which immediately gets the king's full attention. Yuri keeps going, explaining that in this dream, he committed a sin so bad it could never be forgiven. The king ain't buying it, slowly repeating the words back to him, and using his full government name, Father Brio. He straight up asks what unforgivable act he could have possibly done that would make him change this much. All the while, Yuri just stares back at him dead in the eye. After a long, tense moment, Yuri finally admits his sin was that he couldn't protect Brio until the very end. In his dream, that is. The entire kingdom was plunged into the absolute chaos of war. So many innocent people got bodied with zero mercy. The prince tried to clutch the situation and make a stand, but he failed hard. After Brielle fell, he dipped out in shame and was stripped of all his honor. He ended up dying a washed-up, broken man. Yuri clutches his chest as he keeps explaining that When he finally woke up from that nightmare, the necklace his mother had given him was just gone. That was the moment he realized this might not have been just a dream, but some kind of heads up from his mom herself. The king looks a little shaken by that and asks which army specifically was the one that destroyed their kingdom in his dream. Yuri starts panicking inside because he knows it's way too soon to start throwing the Empire's name around. There's still a tiny chance that the invasion could be delayed or even stopped if he plays his cards right. So instead, he dodges the question saying he's not sure and that it was just a random black army that popped up out of nowhere. The king lets out a soft sigh. Then he actually smiles and tells him it was probably just a nightmare, but maybe a warning from his mother too. Either way, he's just glad his son is finally deciding to get his act together. Yuri, however, isn't so sure, because deep down, he knows the truth. He's fighting for a chance to be forgiven for bailing on Brielle and leaving its people to die. But his internal monologue gets cut off when the king straightens his posture and says there's something else, a different matter that they still need to handle. Crossing his arms, His Majesty orders him to draw his sword. You see, Fiore Brian is a prodigy, a dude who was probably swinging a sword before he could even form a proper sentence. The guy was a walking disaster with a blade in his hand who just dominated anyone and everyone who stood in his way. His name was basically carved into the history of the continent through pure unmatched skill, raw talent, and a level of swordsmanship that was just built different. A level of power that just shouldn't be possible for one dude. See, back in the day, everyone was talking about the top 10 strongest fighters on the planet, and Fiore Bro was a permanent resident at the very top of that list, no cap. So as Yuri stands there in the training hall facing this absolute living legend, it suddenly hits different. His old man is probably the single best swordmaster on the whole continent. He glances around the room completely awestruck, muttering about how he's never even stepped foot inside his father's personal training space before. Fiore just says he never figured any of his sons had the knack for swordsmanship. Yuri grinds his teeth at that sick burn, insisting he does have talent, but the king just lets out this long, exhausted sigh and repeats the word back to him, talent. Then completely out of left field, he whips his sword up and points it right at the prince, catching him totally off guard. He starts listing off all the typical physical traits like speed, reflexes, and instinct, asking if just having all that automatically makes someone the greatest swordsman alive. With the blade still at Yuri's throat, he answers his own question saying none of that is the real key. He claims the most crucial thing is the inner fire that pushes a swordsman beyond all their limits. His gaze gets sharper and way more intense as he explains it's something that goes beyond mere duty or what's expected. But then all of a sudden his eyes start glowing a menacing red. Yuri's whole body goes stiff as he feels this insane pressure just radiating off his dad, and the entire vibe around him morphs into something genuinely terrifying. Fiore lowers his sword and continues admitting he doesn't really have the words to describe that feeling properly. So instead he just gives it a name, the sword's calling. Yuri just stares completely surprised and lowers his own weapon quietly, asking if he means something like destiny. Fiore closes his eyes and agrees that's one way to put it. Yuri falls silent as his mind starts to race again, recalling how he was never destined to touch a sword in his last life, and he's left wondering what the heck changed. His eyes dart towards the blade in his hands, as if he's trying to find an answer in its reflection. Fiore cuts him off and throws another question at him. Should Yuri even be holding that sword in the first place? He pushes, asking if Yuri can hear that calling, and demands to know if he would still grip that sword, even with death staring him right in the face. Yuri is completely rattled, stammering out that he doesn't feel anything like that at all. But he's met with the ice-cold glare of his father, which freaks him out so much he stumbles back on wobbly legs. Suddenly it feels like 100 evil eyes are watching him from the shadows, and he starts to completely lose it. The worst memories from his past life come crashing back like a freight train, as he remembers his comrades screaming for him to dodge and just run. He can hear the others crying out for help, calling his name, but he couldn't even manage to answer them. The world around him blurs and shifts, and just like that, he's back in his old life with everything around him burning. The Empire's soldiers march forward, trampling the lifeless body of his friend Hernando beneath their feet. Civilians are getting cut down with zero chill, while the older version of Yuri just stands there forced to watch it all happen. He gasps, looking around in horror, confused about why his home Briole is now on fire. Out of the chaos, a voice shouts, "It's the third prince over there." The last surviving prince of the Briole family. Enemy soldiers immediately spot him and begin to close in while he just stares down at his own trembling hands. That's when the brutal truth hits him, like a ton of bricks. Somehow, he's been dragged back to the exact moment when his kingdom was destroyed. Briole is burning to the ground, and the Imperial army is on the hunt for Prince Yuri. His mind is spinning, finding himself trapped in the same nightmare all over again, being hunted down for being the last survivor, and the one and only heir who could ever restore the lost honor of Briole. Our boy is completely frozen, totally shook, and trying to process how it's even possible for him to be in this place. The Imperial army is just itching to take the prince down, and one of them even lunges from behind to lop his head off. But Yuri is built different. He feels that killer intent creeping up on him and gets his sword at the ready. He pivots and dodges the attack like an absolute pro. He made that by a hair's breadth, and now it's a full-blown clash of steel. It's a pure contest of power, as Yuri struggles to not get overwhelmed. With one beast of a swing, our guy slices an Imperial soldier clean in two, one threat down. But before he can even catch his breath, he hears his own men shouting as they jump in to form a human shield for their prince. They're screaming for Yuri to get out of there while they buy him whatever time they can. He doesn't want it to go down like this, but they're begging him to run as the Imperial army mows them down one by one, right in the middle of all the fire. Yuri's head is just spinning. He's wondering if this whole thing is just some messed up nightmare. He's also questioning if this is the actual fate that Brielle is doomed to suffer. He feels utterly trapped by his own powerlessness as he accepts that this nightmare isn't over. And low-key, he knows there's no stopping what's coming. In that moment, something inside him just shatters. The last prince of Briole stands among the smoldering ruins of his own fallen kingdom, a kingdom he just couldn't save. Meanwhile, the Imperial army charges from behind, thinking this is their golden opportunity to wipe out the very last member of Brylean royalty. Yuri sees them coming, and his grip on his sword gets so tight his knuckles turn white. He knows this battle is far from finished, but he's already made a vow. No matter what happens, he swears he will never be afraid of the enemy again, and you can see that fire burning in his eyes. Prince Yuri turns to face the entire Imperial army, as a voice inside his head hypes him up, telling him to stand tall for what he believes in. That voice echoes in his mind, drilling it into him that he has a duty to Brielle, and you can bet he's going to see it through to the very end. Yuri clutches his blade and goes full send, charging them head-on, his strikes tearing through armor and flesh in a single fluid motion. The absolute scum from the Imperial army just drop like flies. Their blood splashes into Yuri's eyes, almost blinding him, but even with his vision blurred, the guy manages to block a soldier's spear. With his bare hand no less seizing the chance, Yuri rams his sword straight through the soldier's gut. He's breathing heavily when he hears a voice telling him to get ready for death, that his time is up and he should just give in. But the raw agony in his voice just explodes with defiance. He yells that Brielle will never toss its honor aside even if it means dying for it. Fueled by that fury, Yuri lunges at the Imperial army like a cornered animal. He's ready to carve their tombstones right then and there to fulfill his duty to Brielle. Just then, a little Yuri mumbles that he'll protect Brielle's honor until the very end, but Fiore's voice cuts through the noise. It wakes the poor kid up, asking if he can hear him. A single loud call of his name snaps Yuri out of it, and the shaken boy finds himself staring up at the Black Army with his father Fiore. His dad gently tries to calm him down, revealing it was all just an illusion. The moment Yuri grabbed the sword, it triggered a messed up memory, and now his hand is just drenched in sweat. From the look on his face, his father seems to realize he might have been wrong, and now he wants Yuri to take up the sword for real. Little Yuri just smiles at him, saying his mind is already made up, but then he kinda pauses. He's weirded out by the super strange expression on his father's face. Bruh, anyone looking at him would think Yuri just signed his own death warrant or something. The kid tugs on his father's arm and literally tells him to chill out. The old man is completely blindsided. He's just stunned that his own son has the guts to hit him with a reality check like that. Little Yuri just loses it laughing as he confidently says, "See, he's a total genius." His father's eye twitches for a second right before he bonks Yuri on the head. A little later that morning, with the sun just coming up and a nice cool breeze rolling across the field, Bernard is taking a stroll when he spots young Yuri trying to ice a fresh bump on his head. He can't help himself and asks whose bright idea that was, and Yuri just deadpans, "It was my dad." Bernard just shakes his head, totally unimpressed. He jokes that the old man must be in a giving mood today. But for real, he warns Yuri that from now on the training is about to get way more intense. No more kid gloves. Yuri's already steeled himself for it. Thinking back, the kid figures out that Bernard's entire reason for chilling in Brielle probably has everything to do with his father. Seizing his chance, Yuri finally asks if Bernard had to agree to some kind of wild condition, like maybe a duel with his dad. You know, something that basically forced him to stay in Brielle. The old dude doesn't even skip a beat before saying, "Yep." So Yuri pushes that aside and asks a hypothetical. If that condition wasn't on the table, would Bernard have stuck around anyway? The answer is a hard no. And Bernard just cracks up when Yuri calls him a heartless old geek. Still, the old man knows this little prince is just desperate for him to stick around. Bernard says he might just entertain the offer, but only if Yuri can give him a reason that's actually worth his time. He says something really tempting might do the trick, since his old bones might be convinced to forget everything else. Little Yuri is absolutely shook when Bernard suddenly catches the vibe and asks if he's actually serious about learning swordsmanship. The kid is scared completely out of his mind. Meanwhile, Bernard is deep in thought, clearly scheming something big. He's low-key curious to see how this all plays out. Yuri thinks the whole thing is a little much, especially when the guy's nickname is the Sword Demon. But the old man just shrugs, saying it's fine if Yuri hasn't mastered a thing yet. He promises he'll take that into account. Yuri admits it probably won't be much help, then whips out his sword and shows him his personal style. It's swordsmanship that's been fused with mana. The mana literally flows right through the steel of the blade. This is something Bernard admits he's never laid eyes on or even heard of. As far as he knows, mana is just supposed to be a buff for your sword skills, not become a part of the sword itself. Yuri explains that's the very reason it's so difficult to pass on, it always feels incomplete. But Bernard throws him a curveball, saying he's cool with that. He's willing to learn it even if it's not the full package, and now that's his new condition for staying in Briolle. He's confident that he'll at least be able to grasp a piece of it. Yuri is seriously impressed by the old man's swagger, and makes it official Bernard is staying in Briolle just like they planned. With that out of the way, Bernard tells the kid to show him what he's got, and he gets into his stance. Yuri Briolle grips his sword tight and begins to demonstrate his Simhancham technique. But right in the middle of everything, Bernard casually drops a bombshell. He says he was never actually planning on ditching Briolle to begin with. His Majesty had already roped him into staying for another 10 years. That little tidbit hits Yuri like a speeding truck. The kid finally gets it. He just got played big time. Before he can even wrap his head around it, Bernard smirks and reminds him he's supposed to be attacking. But Yuri is done playing games, so he decides to make the first move. This old fossil is seriously getting on his last nerve. He parries Bernard's counter with every ounce of strength he has, their blades screaming as they slam into each other. Later that night, little Yuri is sprawled out on his bed, just totally lost in his own thoughts. He's starting to feel like the future itself is beginning to shift. This isn't the same future where Briolle burned to the ground all because of his own failures. Sure, he hasn't done anything huge just yet, but the fact that Bernard actually chose to stay is undeniable proof that things are already changing. The future always felt so hazy and impossible to reach, but things are slowly starting to change. Still deep down, Yuri knows it's not nearly enough. He's dead set on making the entire empire bend the knee. Just as the kid's ready to get things started, Medea shows up out of nowhere, basically telling Yuri to chill and not cause any more drama. Yuri, always curious, asks what else she's got up her sleeve, but Medea is totally used to his crap. She calls him out for always finding some new reason to need her help, and then she drops a bombshell. Turns out there's an Elders Council meeting tomorrow, and she's practically begging him not to flake. You can tell she's so over his usual chaos. Then his dad just casually mentions that Yuri's going too, which is news to him. Medea chimes in, reminding him it's bright and early, and pretty much the whole council is gonna be there. Right then, she grabs little Yuri's hand, her eyes kinda twinkling, and warns him that the place will be crawling with a bunch of intimidating old dudes. But she's low-key begging him not to throw hands with anyone this time. He just lets out a nervous laugh, promising her she's got nothing to worry about. That he's a changed man, and with that he makes a promise to Ina to stay on his best behavior. The next day, Yuri walks into the Elders' Council, and the first thing that hits him is a solid wall of opposition. No cap, Ina called it. Duke Chenard is the first one to get loud, putting the prince's mana method directly on blast. The old dude is seriously against the idea of the prince learning a mana technique that's supposedly untested. This meeting, which was supposed to be about running the country, has completely lost the plot. It's turned into nothing more than a personal crusade to undermine the royal family, and now Yuri finally gets it. He sees exactly why his dad used to dodge this council like the plague. Duke Chenard Lettery from the west pipes up, insisting Yuri should just stick to the traditional old-school Briolle method. But one of the royal supporters immediately claps back. He argues that this so-called unverified technique is actually the OG founder's legendary style. The Duke isn't having it, though, and demands some cold hard proof to back that claim up. The royal dude is getting visibly pissed that the Duke is straight up doubting the prince's judgment. But the Duke plays the safety card, claiming they're all just gathered out of pure concern for the prince's future. Yuri's just sitting there low-key, finding it hilarious that this entire council of powerful old men is having a full-blown debate over his workout routine. It almost feels like a twisted kind of honor, especially considering this is the same guy who was bowing and scraping before the emperor after Briolle fell. And now here he is, talking all smooth and confident. The irony is just off the charts. The Duke then decides to call on Saint Ed for his opinion. He's the captain of the Royal Guard, so his word carries a lot of Saint. Trying to stay out of the drama, admits he's not entirely sure, saying every mana method has its own strengths and weaknesses. He adds that different strokes work for different folks. The Duke immediately pounces on that non-answer, twisting it to fit his own narrative. He's like, see, even the captain of the Royal Guard has his doubts. So, we should just scrap the whole thing. The royal supporter fires back, saying that's not what he meant. At all. He meant every method has its own unique value. Then the Duke's right-hand man jumps in, basically accusing the other side of not caring if the prince gets hurt by this new method. Yuri can feel the vibe in the room getting toxic real fast, and he is not here for it. In just a few seconds, the entire council had basically ganged up on him. If he hadn't already been grinding, with this mana method he'd be totally screwed and have to rebuild his core from square one. But since he stuck to the founder's original vision, his Simhancham was already locked in deep in his core. Yuri's just frozen, totally speechless and unsure what his next move is, as the weight of the council's judgment crushes down on him. Right when the silence gets so thick you could cut it with a knife, a sharp, casual voice cuts through the tension, saying they sure know how to talk a big game. Every head in the room snaps over to Free Baron Calcio Arancia, who steps forward with a smirk that just shatters the tension. He throws a simple question out to the room, who among them has actually thrown down with an orc. Suddenly all the attention in the room shifts completely to Calcio. The whole atmosphere changes as a few of the council members start whispering among themselves. Duke Gennard raises an eyebrow and asks who he is and what his rank is, basically trying to figure out if this guy even belongs in the room. Calcio Arancia steps up and casually introduces himself as a free baron. The Duke looks genuinely shocked, almost offended that someone of that low status would have the nerve to even attend the Elders' Council. Calcio admits he never planned on coming either, but he had no choice after Count Seymour personally sent him on this mission. At the mention of Count Seymour's name, Yuri's eyes go wide. That name hits different, bringing back a flood of memories. He's the Border Count, the man who defends the outer edges of the Braille's kingdom, a lord who's legendary for fighting right on the front lines. That dude is an absolute living legend, a legit soldier who spent his entire life on the battlefield, and now his name is being thrown around in this very hall. Yuri knows for a fact that Count Seymour couldn't care less about fancy noble parties, so he's low-key confused why the man would even send a representative to this council meeting. Before he can ask, a royal beats him to it, demanding to know why Count Seymour sent Calcio. Calcio, with a total smirk, jokes that Seymour wanted him to see all the high and mighty nobles talk a big game about politics while doing absolutely nothing. After witnessing this whole circus, he admits it all makes sense now, why his boss sent him and only him. Then his entire vibe shifts. Calcio explains that on a real battlefield, what kind of mana method you use doesn't mean a thing. It doesn't matter if it's the Empire's Lion Fang style or Brielle's traditional arts. What really counts is the person swinging the sword. He turns to Yuri, saying he wants to hear what the prince himself thinks about all this. Taking his chance, Yuri steps up and says he wants to master the founding king's mana method. What he doesn't get is why everyone is making such a big deal out of it in the first place. With that, Prince Brielle makes his stance crystal clear. He's pursuing the founder's mana method, and he doesn't care what anyone has to say about it. One way or another, Calcio adds that the sword-wielding prince is dead set on his path. He's obviously following the will and techniques of their founder. He points out that most of the people in this room don't have the authority to speak on this, nor do they have the responsibility to get involved, especially when it has absolutely nothing to do with them. He throws some serious shade at the lazy nobles who are basically glued to their academic chairs. He says anyone who's never actually set foot on a battlefield shouldn't even get a vote. Duke Gennard dryly remarks that the Free Baron certainly doesn't mince his words. Calcio just smiles and says that killing orcs has a way of scraping the polish off a man, so he hopes the Duke can forgive him. He then circles right back to his original question, asking who here has actually killed an orc. The entire room goes dead silent. But Calcio keeps the pressure on, hammering home that monsters don't give a damn what kind of mana you use. The intense way he speaks has all the nobles in the room looking seriously spooked. The Duke's right-hand man agrees with Calcio to an extent, but argues that Yuri is still just a kid who lacks proper judgment. Yuri does not take that sitting down and immediately fires back, asking if the guy is for real, questioning his judgment. He reminds them all that his mana method can't just be tossed aside or rebuilt from scratch like it's nothing. Calcio totally has his back. He says Yuri isn't the type to back down and asks if the council is seriously going to try and rip the kid's mana core out by force. The Duke's sidekick is getting heated, but Calcio stays cool as a cucumber, pointing out how utterly pointless this whole debate is becoming. Little Yuri is probably turning into Calcio's #1 fan at this point, flashing him a grateful smile for stepping in. Calcio just lays it out for them. He says they're actively hurting the prince's development by wasting time on these stupid arguments. It's like the royal capital has all the time in the world to sit around and spew nonsense. That's all it takes for Duke Gennard to finally blow his top. He's clearly fed up after getting verbally roasted, and he snaps right back at Calcio. He accuses the border territories of sucking the budget dry while conveniently keeping their mouths shut. Bruh, that hits a nerve. Calcio's glare could cut glass as he asks if it only stops being quiet for them. When 100 people have to die. The man then drops a grim truth bomb about life on the front lines. He says there are reports of soldiers dying every single day out there, and it's wild that no one here seems to know. Before he's even had a sec to hear about any of them, he drops a bomb that on the very day he bounced from the border, 4 soldiers had been wiped out. One of them was a buddy he had literally had breakfast with that same morning. He quietly admits that he was the one who prepped his friend's body for burial right before coming here. With that heavy reveal, he makes it clear that orcs don't take breaks. They're a race literally built different, made for battle and bloodshed. His words totally trigger a memory for Yuri, reminding him of the whole beef between Briolet and the Klein Duchy. Back in the day, that drama gave the orcs a perfect opening to cross the border and just cause absolute chaos. Yuri asks if things have been hitting different lately, and Calcio confirms they've been way more sus than usual. Yuri also double-checks if Klein's soldiers were posted at the border, but Calcio tells him nah. The border guards had suddenly just dipped, and that's when Yuri finds out the nearby villages got absolutely torched. The people there were either enslaved or straight up slaughtered. It leaves him shook, wondering if this whole thing is turning into a civil war, or if Duke Gennard's third son just fumbled the bag in a major way. Everyone listens to the grim discussion in dead silence, wondering how the prince is even holding it together. Without waiting another second, Prince Yuri ends the meeting and gets up to leave, but Duke Gennard tries to cut in. Yuri, however, shuts him down with zero chill. He throws major shade at the so-called nobles for wasting everyone's time on pointless issues like mana methods, telling them straight they'd be way better off putting that energy into real problems like beefing up defenses against the Duchy of Klein. And the orcs, duh. With that, the kid lands a critical hit on the pride of every greedy scumbag in the room. He tells them to stop being obsessed with a teenager and to start actually doing their jobs for once. Later, word of the whole fiasco with the third prince gets to Count Sider's ears as Calcio gives him the full rundown on what happened. He tells Sador that the kid is acting like a completely different person now, so Sador asks for Calcio's honest-to-God opinion. Calcio just says the prince's eyes didn't seem sketchy to him. Taking that on board, Sidor gives him a new assignment. Calcio's new mission is to keep a very close watch on the third prince. And maybe do a little digging on the side. With that, Sidor ends the call through the crystal saying they'll link up again soon. After the connection dies, Calcio just stands there thinking about how wild it is that soldiers keep dying on the borders while everything back here is so peaceful. Just then he spots the third prince outside. At Yuri's request, Hernando has snuck him out of the palace. Acting like a couple of runaways, Yuri teases him, asking if he used to ditch home 3 times a day just like this. Hernando just laughs and calls himself a pretty big delinquent back in the day. Yuri doesn't get why this clumsy dude is so hyped when he has the freedom to just wander around whenever he wants. But Hernando is all about that thrill of rebellion. He especially loves it when it involves doing something totally forbidden. Like a prince sneaking out of the palace. He asks Yuri to spill the tea on their spicy plan. But Yuri just shrugs it off, saying nothing too wild is going down while he's there. Still, Hernando keeps pressing him to reveal what's really up. Turns out Yuri is planning on hitting the biggest illegal casino in the entire capital. Hernando is absolutely floored. He really thought Yuri wasn't going to pull any more reckless stunts. Now the kid is begging him for directions to the place. He's claiming this whole mission is for the good of Brielle. That line instantly flips a switch in Hernando. He's suddenly buzzing with excitement and happily agrees to lead the way. He's totally down to help turn that casino upside down. Among the big names that everyone in Briolet used to talk about in his past life, a few always stood out. This included the king of the underworld, who was also moonlighting as a massive loan shark. And then there was the business titan, who literally built the biggest trading company on the continent. Next up, the streets of Brio were gripped by fear. This was thanks to the legendary assassin who took the head clean off the shoulders of the top crime boss. The guy who got murked was Goryo, and yet here he is now very much alive and kicking as the underworld's top loan shark. Standing in front of a young Yuri, Goryo says it's a real honor to have such distinguished guests grace his casino. And just like that, Yuri realizes Goryo is already clued in that they're the third prince and the royal mage. That's the real reason he came down, to personally give them a welcome. Yuri gets straight to the point, making it clear he isn't there to play games, and Goryo immediately catches the vibe shift, flipping the switch to business mode. Hernando, on the other hand, looks completely blindsided. Bruh thought he was here for the adrenaline rush of the poker tables, not to get stuck in the middle of some high-stakes political maneuvering. Yuri silences him with a single glance, and Goryo smoothly asks if the prince is looking to borrow some funds. Turns out Yuri is actually pitching it as more of an investment opportunity. But Goryo can see right through that. This kid is obviously building up his own secret nest egg. The fact that he came here instead of a traditional bank just makes the whole situation way more spicy. Goryo can tell the third prince has some major moves planned and a fire in his eyes, but Yuri isn't about to spill the details. He shuts that line of questioning down, reminding Goryo that it's not his place to ask, forcing the casino owner to backpedal with an apology. Yuri leans in casually, mentioning that since he's the one taking the risk, Goryo needs to explain what the investment is actually for. It's revealed that Yuri plans to buy up all the Magranza, a super rare spice, from the Clan Mountains. He's betting the house that the available supply is about to be dwarfed by the incoming demand. Hernando feels like he's caught in a whirlwind, but Goryo gets it. He's aware that Magranza is a crucial ingredient for making luxury perfumes. Still, he's not totally sold on whether Yuri is a safe bet, but the prince is absolutely certain the hype is about to explode. Hernando is well aware of the civil war that's about to pop off in the Klein Principality, not to mention the orcs that are running wild all over the area, which makes him seriously question if the spice prices will actually shoot up. He starts to think the prince might just be trying to monopolize a local product before anyone else catches on. But you can just tell by Yuri's whole demeanor that this isn't some random shot in the dark. Even Goryo senses that Yuri Briol isn't just some clueless noble playing dress-up as a merchant. No cap. This kid is methodical, sharp, and is definitely holding more cards than he's showing. Yuri then starts breaking down the financial details, not as royalty, but as a stone-cold investor. Goryo takes a long moment to think it all over before he finally slides the contract over for a signature. Yuri is all smiles, looking super satisfied with the agreement he just secured. Hernando, meanwhile, is having a hard time processing how this kid had the sheer guts to borrow that much money, and from a guy like Goryo, no less. He's still complaining salty that nobody gave him a heads up, and extra mad that they haven't even placed a single bet yet. But Yuri knew that if he'd spilled the beans, Hernando would have dragged him by the ear straight back to the castle, and right in front of the king. So yeah, he kept the whole plan on the down low. Now he's got some business to take care of over at the guild. But when it comes to the Magranza, those profits are already a done deal. Yuri is fully aware that the first person to get taken out in the coming civil war will almost certainly be the alchemist, who happens to be the only one who knows how to properly process Magranza and is a close advisor to Duke Klein. Until a replacement can be found, Yuri has a monopoly and can sell the spice for whatever insane price he wants. He also knows this kind of delicate work can't be trusted to just anybody, which is why their next stop is a seriously sketchy-looking building. Hernando is throwing some major side-eye, but Yuri just walks up and knocks loudly, calling out for Rainwood. All the while, Hernando is still griping that the official guild would have been the much smarter play. The door opens to reveal Irene, who looks totally lost, asking what's happening, as Yuri immediately introduces himself and offers her a job. Meanwhile, this clown of a mage is absolutely losing his mind over the third prince, stooping so low as to hire someone like her. He's totally ripping into Yuri's decision-making, in complete disbelief that he'd gamble the future of Magranza's trade on some tiny back-alley shop. But Yuri, rocking a wicked grin, knows that even though she's running a shabby-looking company right now, it's all part of the plan. He's dead certain about one thing. Irene Wood is destined to become the most legendary merchant on the entire continent, especially while Goryo is busy using every dirty trick in the book. When the going gets tough, Irene is built different, valuing her word above anything else, which makes Yuri flash a creepy little smirk. He remembers that in his past life she only reached the status of a legendary merchant, but this time, Yuri is dead set on making her a straight-up myth. Hernando, still trying to process everything, nervously asks if Yuri is finally done with his little side quests. Yuri just gives a casual shrug, mentioning he has one final stop to make, forcing Hernando to scramble after him. As they walk, Yuri is already steps ahead in his mind. The underworld's loan shark and the great merchant are now pieces on his board. Now he just needs one last person to complete his dream team. They arrive on a totally run-down street where desperate beggars are literally fighting over food scraps. Yuri knows this has to be the place. And then he spots them, a small group of kids, and as the third prince, Yuri Briol, he steps forward to address the woman leading them, the very same one who took out Goryo in his previous life, the legendary assassin Asana. Of course, the first question popping into the future assassin's head was why a prince would be caught dead, taking a casual stroll through the absolute worst part of the Yuri immediately tells her to chill, promising he's there with nothing but good intentions. He says there's no reason for her to be on guard. In fact, he claims he came because he wanted to offer some assistance to those in need. He glances over at Arnando and gives him the signal to bring out what they prepared, but the mage can barely stand apart with it. After a moment, he's forced to hand over a sack that's practically bursting with gold coins. Yuri's eyes scan the area and notice a small girl hiding behind Asana, who is clearly freaked out by these rich-looking strangers. Yuri instantly recognizes that this kid was the entire reason Asana got a massive loan from Goryo in the past timeline. She was desperate. She had to swallow her pride to get the money for the little girl's life-saving medical treatment. And just like everyone else who borrowed from that soulless loan shark, Asana's life spiraled into total ruin from that moment on. This is what ultimately pushed her down the dark path of becoming an assassin. She shot up the ranks in the criminal underworld, becoming known as one of the deadliest killers for hire. So, Yuri's little field trip to the slums is all about stopping that tragic future before it can even start. Without getting into the details, he holds out the bag of money to Asana. He tells her to use it to take the little girl to the temple for proper treatment. And when she asks what he wants for this insane amount of cash, his answer is short and sweet. With a bright smile, he says the only payment he needs is for Asana to remember his name, Yuri Briole, the third prince of the kingdom. After that, they don't hang around and quickly make their way out of that depressing slum. As they're leaving, Hernando still can't wrap his head around why the prince just handed a fortune to some random woman on the street. For Yuri, however, it's a genius-level investment in his future. In just one night, he's locked down connections with 3 people who are about to become major players in a few years. He's basically got the key figures for his master plan in his pocket now, but besides those 3, there's just one more person he needs to win over. He turns to Hernando and hits him with a simple question. He asks the goofy mage what kind of vision he saw back in the founding king's tomb. With a wry grin, Hernando admits that the whole time he was in that dream world, he was just gambling his heart out. Yuri was definitely not expecting that answer. The mage explains that he was playing a high-stakes game at the Empire's famous Barth Ligas casino, with his very own life as the ante. Now I know it's a little wild, but for a degenerate gambler like our boy, the casino floor is basically his home turf. But let's put the future sight on pause for a sec. Yuri made it crystal clear to Hernando that he needs to keep his lips sealed about everything that went down. Not even the king can know, and just like Yuri called it, the court mage gets summoned to the throne room to report on what the prince has been up to. Even though they tried to ghost the palace without anyone noticing, the king still found out they'd left last night. Hernando doesn't even bother denying they went out, which just makes the king want all the juicy details. The mage starts off by explaining how Yuri pretty much strong-armed him into leaving the castle in the dead of night. He tells the truth, admitting they booked it straight to the biggest casino in the capital. The memory of their sketchy meeting with that notorious loan shark is fresh in his mind, of course. King Fiore would naturally just assume they went there to burn through a pile of cash. Putting on the most convincing smile he can, the mage lies right through his teeth, confirming that, yeah, they totally spent money at the tables. The king surprisingly doesn't seem fazed or pissed off. To really sell the lie, Hernando adds that he lost every single coin he loaned the prince in a bunch of card games. He claims he's just terrible at cards. But when the king asks for more info on their little adventure, the reality of their strange trip flashes through his mind. They took the cash they got from that underground shark and gave it to some broke-ass old merchant guild. After that, they just donated the rest of the coins to a random orphan they found in the slums. Obviously, Hernando leaves all those parts out. The way he tells it, they just wandered around for a bit to see how the regular folks live. He says the prince was just genuinely interested in what his people do before sunrise. Then they were right back in the castle. That's the whole story. King Fiore listens to the report with an unreadable poker face. He can totally tell the court mage is capping, but he decides not to press the issue. Switching topics completely, he asks Hernando, with a cheerful smile, if he's planning to hit up the ball that's happening soon. The court mage flashes a confident grin and says, "You bet I am." Now the king is genuinely surprised. This guy isn't exactly the type you'd expect to see at a formal party. But hey, people can change, and besides, it's been a minute since he's had a chance to bust a move. Meanwhile, Yuri is back on the training grounds for his daily beatdown session with the sword demon. As usual, he gets his butt handed to him and ends up flat on the ground. As he's recovering from the latest thrashing, he notices a bit of a scene nearby and starts roasting Bernard for being so popular with the ladies around the castle. A bunch of maids can't stop stealing glances at the ripped trainer, all blushing and whispering to each other. Yuri tries to peer pressure his stoic teacher into going to the ball, telling him to give the people what they want. Bernard just shoots him down, saying he has zero interest in that stuff. but that inherited sword technique, that's been living rent-free in his head since he first tried it. And damn it, the third prince was totally right. It doesn't matter how hard he tries to get the hang of the moves, there's just no concrete form to the style, mostly because he can only practice half of the real deal. For Yuri, however, the soul severance technique is as natural as breathing. He just moves like water with no predictable pattern or logic. It's a completely unique style. A mana method that's directly fused with swordsmanship is something that just doesn't exist anywhere else. But Bernard isn't giving up. He's thinking that maybe if he sees the prince use it in an actual fight, something will finally click. But for now, it's back to their regular training. Bernard is low-key hyped about Yuri's progress, both in his sword game and how he handles his mana. No cap, the kid's growth rate is just insane. This isn't just progress, it's a whole new level of evolution. But the prince is still trying to overwrite the muscle memory from the Briole method he mastered in his last life. And it's a serious grind. The sword demon had to tell the kid straight up not to rush things. He's legit worried Yuri's leveling up way too fast for his own good. His skills are outpacing what his own body can handle. For someone so young, what he's accomplished is already off the charts. But if he keeps pushing it this hard, something's bound to break. Rocking a confident smirk, Yuri told the old swordmaster not to worry, promising he'd keep everything balanced. He claims to know his body best, and to prove it, he says he's ready for another round right now, tossing aside the wooden training sword to get spicy. He whipped out the legendary ancestor's blade with a super cocky grin. Yuri challenged Bernard to draw his own weapon, and the sword demon, respecting the guts, elegantly unsheathed his sword. To make things even more interesting, Yuri threw down a bet. If he can actually manage to land a single hit on him, Bernard has to show up at the upcoming royal ball. Of course, the sword nerd shot down that absolutely ridiculous wager. Besides, he was sure he'd win anyway, and on top of that, he had zero faith that Yuri, with his track record of being a troll, would actually keep his end of the bargain. He wouldn't honor any kind of bet, totally ticked off that his own teacher was basically shrugging off his challenge. The third prince started pumping mana straight into his blade. He launched himself forward like a cannonball, looking for any tiny opening, as his sword crashed against Bernard's. Master and student were clashing blades, both with massive smiles on their... Quick spoiler alert, the third prince totally lost. Yeah, he's still got a long way to go. A few days pass, and the sound of horse hooves echoing towards the castle can be heard from every corner of the capital. The night of the ball has finally come. Inside one of the swanky carriages, a tall blonde dude, decked out in some seriously shiny armor, was gazing out the window. The Empire's second prince, Georg Ivanov Grandjean, was about to make his grand entrance. And sitting right across from him was the one and only little princess, Yekaterina Ivanov Grandjean. It's been way too long since she was last away from the Empire. And tonight there's one person in particular she's dying to see. Just a few hours before the party kicks off, our third prince is getting all dressed up, finally swapping his usual comfy, simple clothes for some much more royal and over-the-top formal wear. In reality, he'd rather just yeet this fancy outfit into the sun. All the frills and decorations are just way too flashy for his more practical tastes. Ina pointed out that he used to be all about this kind of extravagant stuff. After she finished buttoning him up and fixing his collar, Ina started heading for the door, but before she could dip, the third prince asked her for a dance. His excuse was that he needed some practice and didn't have anyone else to dance with. Ina just stammered, looking completely thrown off by her young master's request. She was pretty sure this kid was just plotting to step all over her feet or trip her up or something. But he just smoothly took her hand, pulling her closer and promising he wouldn't mess with her. No pranks tonight, for real. For this moment, they were just partners moving to a silent rhythm only they could hear. He led, and she followed, and Ina felt her heart do a complete backflip in her chest. She couldn't even speak as the handsome young prince carefully guided her across the floor. Once she finally got her bearings, Ina bragged that she was actually a pretty decent dancer herself. In response, he playfully shot back, asking who she'd been dancing with. Ina boasted once again that she was pretty popular, but she admitted she'd never danced with a partner who was so short before. No big deal though, that height difference wouldn't be an issue for long. For a few minutes, the two of them just danced freely under the moonlight model. Yuri's just peeking through the window, while Ina is busy stepping all over his feet. Meanwhile, the ballroom is absolutely poppin' with some seriously good music. All the nobles are out on the floor, with their dates busting out their most elegant moves. From the VIP booth up top, King Fior is just vibing on his throne, sipping wine and watching the party unfold. Over by the food table, which is loaded with snacks, the three princes are just kicking back, laughing and chatting. But even while he's deep in conversation, Yuri is low-key scanning the entire room. He spots Count Sador in the crowd. And man, that guy is just built different from all the other knights. Shockingly, the Count didn't just send Baron Arancha to represent him tonight. Yuri's gaze then flicks over to his oldest brother's glasses. He casually asks the crown prince if his vision is getting any blurrier, but his big bro just waves it off, saying, "It's nothing to lose sleep over." Just then, a massive trumpet fanfare erupts. It's the signal that some major players are about to make their entrance. All the nobles quickly part like the Red Sea as the Empire's second prince Georg makes a grand entrance with his entire squad. He makes a beeline straight for the king to show his respect. Fiore shakes the blonde prince's hand and gives him a polite thank you for showing up. After a bit more small talk, Georg finally introduces his little sister to everyone. The second Yekaterina steps into the light, Yuri feels his stomach just drop, but a complete 180 from his dark expression. The little princess is all grace and politeness with her own greetings. It's wild to think that this girl who looks like an absolute angel is the very person who's going to wreck his kingdom. Even now, Yuri can't forget the good times they had, but he also remembers the brutal, unavoidable way it all ended. The apology she scrawled on a note sent by a carrier pigeon still gives him nightmares, no cap. In this timeline, he's sworn to himself he won't get close to her, not even a little bit. He can't afford to fumble the bag that badly again. Never again. His silent, intense mood from the sidelines actually catches the princess's eye. While Yuri's brothers are busy showering her with compliments and smooth talk, she just offers them some polite but kinda cold smiles in return. The party goes on, and wherever the princess drifts, Yuri makes damn sure he's on the opposite side of the room. He glances at the dance floor and sees his oldest brother Cedric dancing with some noble lady. That's so typical of Cedric. He's always super respectful and smooth. Yuri can see all the makings of a great king in him. Compared to a guy like that, Yuri feels like a total slob. Bruh, he can't even dodge the Empire's princess for one single night without it being awkward. Luckily, his second brother has zero chill and is constantly bugging the young lady. Even though Yuri is carrying the weight of a future that hasn't even happened, the memories and feelings are still way too real. Thankfully, Ina is there to lift his spirits with some bomb cookies and a warm smile. He asks her if it's exhausting having to serve guests at a huge party like this. She just jokes back that this is a piece of cake compared to taking care of a certain someone she knows. After Yuri demolishes all the cookies on her tray, his mood actually lifts a bit. He leans back against a table, just wishing this whole stuffy noble event would wrap up. But his thoughts are cut short by the Empire's second prince, who's walking toward him looking kinda worried. In his past life, Georgi Vranagranzian was an absolute legend on the battlefield. He was the one leading the armies instead of the actual king. Yuri's etiquette lessons kick in on autopilot. He gives a polite bow and formally introduces himself as the third prince to the very man who brought his kingdom to its knees. It takes every last ounce of his self-control to keep a straight face and not just lunge at the guy. But unluckily for Yuri, looks like Prince Georg has his eyes set on Yuri. With the smirk that could cut glass, the second prince suddenly unleashes this sharp, soul-crushing aura that wraps right around his neck. It feels just like a dozen ice-cold blades are dancing against his throat. The prince asks with zero chill if Yuri just turned 13 this year. Bruh, somebody better call the authorities. But he doesn't even wait for a response. Georg just strolls away, having figured out that Fiore's third son is actually a pretty gifted kid. Yuri's hands ball into fists, and he's totally pissed. That psycho just straight up threatened him with some kind of a twisted test. He could feel how ridiculously strong and dangerous Georg was, and the dude isn't even at his peak yet. Man, these imperial heirs are built different. Seriously, they're all a bunch of jerks. All of a sudden, the sound of wine glasses hitting the floor grabs everyone's attention. Turns out Ina accidentally spilled wine on Georg's cape, which is a massive sign of disrespect to the Empire's symbol. But instead of looking mad, the second prince just gets this wicked look in his eye. Yuri sees the whole scene play out, and his blood runs absolutely cold. Without even hesitating, Georg's hand goes right to the hilt of his sword. He casually places the blade against Ina's neck, looking like a reaper who's just itching to collect a soul. He declares that according to imperial law, a mistake this serious gets punished by death. Yuri is the only one who saw it. That monster tripped Ina on purpose. And now this prince wants her head, all for his own messed up version of justice. Thankfully, the king finally steps in, telling Prince Georg off for ruining the party. King Fiore makes it clear that if Georg is so desperate to see blood, he can go spill it back in his own kingdom. Feeling the pressure from the king, Georg pulls back his sword bows and offers a super fake apology. He goes on about the mutual respect their two nations have always shared. Then, in a brilliant move to flip the script, he brings up the name Gottensha. Gottensha was an imperial knight that Fiore executed on the Empire's own land, a major incident. The emperor, showing respect for the king, didn't demand any payback. Georg compares that huge event to this tiny one, insisting that executing this maid is all about protecting the peace and honor of both their nations. No cap, this is a masterclass in manipulation. It's a low-key challenge to the king's power all wrapped up in one sentence. Georg has backed the king into a corner, with his kingdom's honor hanging in the balance. If the king stops the prince from carrying out this twisted punishment, it's going to look like a direct challenge to the empire. Yuri is running all the calculations in his head, weighing every single option. Ideals versus reality, reason versus power. All of that gets tossed aside for the one rule that matters most in Briole. The oath of Briole is absolute. You must never abandon your honor, not even in death. It's the only way. Right before Prince Georg can swing his sword and separate Ina's head from her shoulders, Yuri's voice cuts through the silence. He coolly walks into the center of the hall and announces that he is the maid's master. Since she's in his service, her mistakes are his mistakes. And seeing as he's a prince too, he asks Georg to maybe reconsider the whole death sentence. Deep down, Yuri can't help but feel like this is karma catching up to him for his past life of crime. Whatever cards he's been dealt in this life, he has to play them. It's not like he ever had a choice. So instead of a savage execution in the middle of a fancy party, instead he shot his shot and called for a trial by combat. The Empire's second prince just couldn't hold it in and burst out laughing at the kid's dead serious request. But for real, he wasn't going to forget Yuri's name now. As the two princes stared each other down, you could hear a pin drop in the hall. George then faced the king and was like, "Yeah, I'll take this absolutely bonkers offer." With a heavy heart, Fiore gave the okay, knowing full well he was basically sending his son into a lion's den. Thank goodness Prince Georg wasn't a total psycho and saved some face by demanding a proxy fight, pointing out the huge power gap between them. He promised to pick the greenest rookie from the Imperial Royal Guard, just to make things look a little fair for our boy. And with that sorted, the second prince figured there was no point sticking around. Once the crazy kid was dealt with, he was out. Yuri immediately bolted over to Ina to see if she was okay, but the poor girl was still shaking like a leaf. I mean, can you blame her? She was literally moments away from getting unalived in the worst way possible. Yuri tried to help her up, but she was just too weak. The thought of getting her master hurt because of her was just too much to handle. In the end, the other maids had to basically carry her out of there. As Yuri headed off in the other direction, he just so happened to cross paths with the Empire's princess. Yekaterina's usual smile was completely wiped off her face, replaced by a stone-cold serious look. Yuri just shut his eyes, pushed away all that old drama from his past, and walked right by her without a single word. Zero chill. And of course, Hernando was just kicking back, sipping his wine from a distance, watching the whole soap opera unfold. But on the way to his room, Yuri's big brother was posted up waiting for him. The Crown Prince's usual chill vibe was gone, replaced with pure worry. He straight up asked his little bro what the hell was going to happen now. Yuri had to explain, saying he just couldn't stand by and watch that jerk treat Ina like she was just some animal to be butchered. The Crown Prince just sighed and messed up Yuri's hair affectionately. It had been a minute since he'd felt his brother's genuine concern for his safety before finally letting him go. Cedric offered to help his little bro out with this massive headache he'd just created for himself. Prince Georg tried to play it off like he was being generous by picking a proxy close to Yuri's level, but Cedric saw right through that crap. Cedric knew that if Yuri fought a knight, his own age and strength, it would be way easier for some kind of accident to happen during the fight. Cedric wanted to pull some strings and handle this mess himself, but Yuri was having none of it. He was like, "I started this, I'll finish it." And honestly, seeing how confident his little brother was, Cedric decided to drop it and just trust him. For now, the party was a total disaster. With the Empire's second prince storming out, it was now Cedric's job to fix the super awkward vibe in the room. No cap, Yuri really admires his big bro. He's 100% sure that if the kingdom hadn't gone down in flames, Cedric would have been an amazing king. And in this life, he's determined to see just how great the kingdom of Brielle can become with Cedric in charge. But for that to happen, our boy has to win this fight and secure a future for them all. It didn't take Georg long to pick his guy. Some red-headed hotshot, the youngest knight in his order, steps up to the plate. This dude, a prime product of the Empire's elite training, is now on stage ready to face the third prince, while everyone else watches from their comfy seats like it's a pay-per-view event. Judging by Hernando's massive grin, he wasn't worried one bit about this showdown. As for Captain Sand, he's been around the block enough to know a prodigy when he sees one, and this opponent's energy is rock solid. You can just tell from his super polished movements. The knight is clearly a master with a blade too. I mean, he's the poster child for the Empire's military machine after all. So, while Captain Sand is over here having a panic attack about Yuri's safety, the court mage is just chilling next to him, smiling and laughing as he watches the stage. Up there, the third prince is just casually stretching and yawning, like this whole thing is a total snooze fest. In Hernando's expert opinion, there's absolutely nothing to be worried about. See, the rank of Grand Wizard is a level that's basically impossible for most mages to reach. It's a title reserved only for those who've mastered something called origin magic. And hidden within these absolutely broken origin magic spells is the ultimate cheat code, the power to literally see the future. There's this totally cracked ability called fate-revealing magic. And get this, in the entire world, only one mage has ever managed to master that OP skill. His name's Hernando, and he remembers throwing down with the third prince back when they were both in their degenerate gambler phase. It was wild because that was the very first time he'd lost any money since he got his unique magic. At first, he tried to write it off as just a weird fluke. Maybe it was just his bad luck, but that's impossible. His fate-revealing magic literally lets him see an opponent's cards. He can even read the flow of fortune with a single look. But for some reason, he couldn't see a single thing about the prince's future. When he pushed his powers to the max, all he got was a weird vision of a mountain made entirely of swords. In the middle of this insane scene, he could just make out a boy with black hair and eyes that had this super arrogant glint. No cap, it was unmistakably the third prince. Hernando saw the young man just shredding through hordes of enemies even though his body was all bloody and beaten up. He just kept swinging his sword and didn't back down for even a second. This strange vision finally cut out with the young knight collapsing in complete and utter despair. Back then, Hernando just dismissed the whole thing as a weird glitch in his ability, a total coincidence, if you want to call it that. From that day forward, he knew there was an anomaly, like a bug in the code of the universe. Hernando was right there with the prince the whole time, witnessing the kid's bizarre behavior and massive changes firsthand. Hernando was dead set that his fate-revealing magic could eventually punch through that seemingly unbreakable wall of mystery. But now it all makes sense. He's pretty damn sure that Prince Sayuri is a man who has no destiny at all. And right now, that very kid with no future to speak of is about to flex his skills for everyone in the arena. His opponent has been practicing, just swinging his sword on the other side of the stage, and it's driving the third prince absolutely crazy with impatience. Second Prince Georg shouts out to the fighters, asking if they're ready to go, and both of them give the signal to start the match. With the king watching their every move, the trial by combat officially begins. In the first couple of seconds, both the prince and the knight are just keeping their distance on the lookout for any sudden moves. But the moment the signal was given, Yuri just blitzed forward at an insane speed. It totally caught the knight by surprise. He had a flash forward of himself, getting so wrecked by the first hit that a whole quarter of his upper body was just straight up deleted from existence. But like a true battle-hardened warrior, the knight powered through the shock and got his sword up for a block. They started trading blows just milliseconds apart, zipping all over the arena. Yuri's blade was a blur, seamlessly switching from offense to defense, depending on if he needed to attack or block. As the fight goes on, he's finding it harder and harder to stop himself from smiling. The opponent, who's been desperately trying to catch him off guard, he's now rocking a long, fresh cut right on his cheek. In the stands, Fiore, looking like a seriously concerned father, turns to his court mage with a question. He asks Hernando how this deadly tango is going to end. And to be honest, the all-seeing mage can't predict the final result at all. But instead of being upset, he's actually thrilled. The king remembers when the young magician first showed up in Briole. He claimed that it was guidance from the heavens that led him here. When the king asks if his time to leave has finally come, Hernando gives a firm no. Fiore lets out a sigh of relief. It's a good thing a valuable asset like him is sticking around. Hernando humbly replies, and the king warns him that being too modest can sometimes bring you bad luck, telling him to get his eyes back on the fight. He then asks the strongest swordsman in the world for his professional opinion on who the better fighter is between the two on stage. Without even a moment's hesitation, King Fiore gives that title to the Empire's own prodigious young knight. Let's be real, the king isn't wrong. Hernando is finally starting to see the bigger picture. It's becoming crystal clear why the heavens basically shoved him in the direction of this kingdom. The cosmos is playing matchmaker, trying to get him close to a man who's built different, someone who could literally change the world's fate. At first, Hernando thought the main event was the king, the strongest swordsman around. Honestly, with years of peace, he was low-key, ready to pack his bags and just ghost the whole scene. But now seeing this fascinating young man evolve into an absolute beast changes everything. There's no way Hernando is leaving now, and missing out on the action, especially when the young knight tried to bum rush him and Yuri just cranked his mana up to 11. He completely coated his ancestral blade in raw power. Yuri's done playing around. It's time to unleash some real attacks. To put an end to this whole charade, the young knight could literally feel the air shift as the prince's speed went into overdrive. His blade moved like a flash flood, a silver glint dancing around before closing in for the kill shot right at the enemy's throat. As the mana got so close it felt like it was burning his skin, and the chilling steel inched nearer, the young knight just closed his eyes. He was completely ready to accept his fate. The people who were most shook by this were the royals watching from the Empire's viewing deck. Being on another level, Fiore could follow every single move, and even Captain Sand was floored. His jaw was on the ground watching the sudden turn of events, while Hernando just smirked at the choice the kid made. He actually changed his sword's trajectory at the last possible second, just a few inches away from a clean decapitation. He intentionally stopped the blade's deadly path. The moment the young knight screamed his surrender, the entire stadium erupted in cheers for the prince. Hernando has spent ages wandering the continent chasing signs from the heavens. Who would have guessed he'd find someone who completely defies that guidance? A person who turns death into life and life back into death. The humble mage's destiny has been rewritten, and so has the boy's. His every move spits in the face of the cosmos. Yuri Briol is the only living being who isn't a puppet on the strings of a pre-written destiny. Hernando absolutely can't wait to see how this kid is going to shake up the entire world. Just thinking about how this fate breaker will reshape everyone's future fills the old mage with a crazy amount of excitement. And just like that, 5 years of peace went by in the land of the Briolis. Today, a brand new maid is sprinting through the castle halls, riddled with anxiety because it's her first day and she's already lost. Just when she was hoping she could slide into her post without anyone noticing, she got caught. A voice from out of nowhere made her freeze in place. He had a deep voice, a seriously dark look in his eyes, and the signature black hair that screamed Briolais loyalty. The man started grilling her, demanding to know why she was suspiciously wandering through the empty corridors. The newbie tried to keep her cool and remember what her trainers told her, but the man just kept staring her down. He didn't have that stoic, unreadable expression, so he definitely wasn't the king. The crown prince, on the other hand, is famous for greeting everyone with a kind and gentle smile. But this guy, he had sinister eyes and a swagger that just screamed trouble. She figured he had to be one of the other princes. Terrified of ticking off a boss on her first day, the newbie tried to excuse herself and get away. But the man just shouted at her, even louder, furious that she was ignoring a royal. He sarcastically asked if the new maids were given some kind of instruction manual that specifically told them to avoid him at all costs. Losing his patience, the prince decided it was time to school this new girl on proper etiquette, but before he could do anything, a relaxed voice called out to his brother, telling him to knock off the creepy behavior since the new girl was just in training. Everyone had warned her to keep an eye out for one particular person in this castle. They said if she saw someone rocking a confident expression with a sword hanging, and she had to greet the handsome third prince with the highest level of respect. After prying his brother off, the poor terrified maid, Yuri decided to go for a casual stroll around the courtyard. With a bag full of snacks, the maid hooks him up with some seriously good sweets as a thank you for getting her out of a jam. They were no cap delicious. After wiping his hands clean, Yuri gets serious. He's officially hit the unarmed realm level. It's a state where his body feels lighter, and the strain on him is way less whether he's holding a sword or not. After years of grinding, reaching this level is a huge deal. It's been 5 whole years since Lauren's undead sword took him out, and he got a second chance waking up in his 13-year-old body. But now he's 18, and the peaceful days are about to be a thing of the past. Speaking of which, the old geezers in charge of the kingdom are probably in a meeting just yapping away right now. So Yuri makes his way to the conference room. He knocks, even yells, but gets absolutely nothing in return. He can just hear some intense arguing seeping through the door. The guard posted outside just suggests that the third prince should probably try knocking again, as if someone would magically hear him this time. Done with being ignored, Yuri decides to flex his new mana enhancement skills, and he sends the freaking door flying open with one punch. The kingdom's highest-ranking nobles are totally shook, looking confused as the third prince casually apologizes for busting in. He explains he was knocking for a solid minute, but since nobody heard him, he just, used a bit more force the second time. Yuri then looks straight at his father, the king at the head of the table, and basically says he's joining this meeting. Once he's got a seat, the debate over the final and most critical topic on the agenda picks back up. One of the younger counts gets the ball rolling again, arguing that they don't have any troops to spare for their allies across the border. If the nobles are just going to ghost the Empire's super serious request, then they better be ready to deal with the fallout themselves. Yuri totally gets it. He can see why everyone is so dug in on their positions. Everyone's just running the numbers trying to figure out what they stand to gain or lose. It's all about the money. If he remembers right, this coalition of allied forces and the absolute disaster it's about to walk into is just getting started. The Empire put out a call to every kingdom nearby, asking them to join what they're calling the Allied Forces. They were practically begging for soldiers from different nations, trying to scrape together an army big enough for a huge orc raid out east. But Yuri knows this whole operation is doomed to fail spectacularly. The orcs are going to get pissed and will absolutely steamroll the human army. This is going to put all the bordering nations in a seriously tight spot. But the weirdest part was how the orcs seemed to just ignore the Empire completely. That's when it hits everyone. The letter, the failed raid. All of it was a giant setup from the very beginning. In that timeline, Brielle lost some of its best knights and heroes, including the legendary Sir Leon Flandre. But with Yuri in the room this time, there's no way he's letting things go down like that again. The nobles were completely deadlocked on whether to send troops. But before all the whining and complaining about protecting their own soldiers could get any worse, Yuri steps up. He straight up volunteers to go to the front lines himself. He says he'll join the Allied forces to show the world that they're for real. As for all these scheming old dudes, all Yuri asks is that they do their jobs as nobles and stop making the Brielle family name look bad. Hearing his son speak with so much guts and honor actually makes the king crack a small smile. He's low-key impressed. His boy just walked in and dropped the perfect solution that solved all their problems at once. Later on, Yuri heads over to his favorite training spot to get a sparring session in with Bernard, one of his brothers. The jerk comes storming into the arena, demanding to know if the rumors are true that his little bro is actually heading to war. The arrogant meathead just can't wrap his head around why Yuri would risk his neck when he's a prince who could just chill in the castle forever. Yuri just shoots back that what he's doing is exactly what a royal is supposed to do. With a heavy sigh, the second prince admits that he finally sees what his little brother is all about. With a whole new respect in his eyes, he promises to hold down the fort and protect the palace while Yuri's gone. Then the lovable idiot books it out of there with his signature weirdo run. At this point, Bernard would honestly be relieved if the prince just didn't cause any problems, never mind actually protecting their home. Speaking of leaving home, though, the third prince asks his longtime friend and instructor Bernard if he's actually worried about him heading out. The legendary sword demon figures that as long as the kid avoids doing anything monumentally stupid, he'll probably make it back in one piece. And coming from this super critical old man, that's pretty much a glowing review no cap. Still, he tells the prince to always stay on his toes, because back in his prime, Bernard learned firsthand just how nasty orcs can be. He warns Yuri that those big brutes are way stronger and sneakier than you'd ever expect telling him to, especially look out for any orcs that are rocking a tattered fleck on their backs. That's some straight-up World of Warcraft stuff right there. They're called orc falls, and they're basically a cracked-out, super ferocious version of the regular beasts. Yuri just assures his trainer that it's all good. He's got his own methods for dealing with threats. Their conversation gets cut short when Ina bursts into the training hall, looking like she just ran a marathon. She's here to let her master know that his guest has arrived, along with that special something he ordered. You see, Yuri has a plan for the upcoming orc raid that everyone thinks is doomed. A very special plan, and the guest Ina was talking about is now waiting for him. The dude is just chilling in Yuri's office sipping on some tea. When the third prince walks in, Guillermo, the vice president of the Elaine Merchant Guild, immediately jumps to his feet with a super respectful greeting. Yuri was actually expecting to meet with Elaine today, but the boss lady herself is currently out on the road, so the VP had to fill in for her. Even after their merchant guild has been crushing it for the past 5 years, she still prefers to go on the dangerous supply runs herself, saying it's what she does best. Anyway, Guillermo didn't come empty-handed. He brought Yuri's special item, and the prince excitedly opens the ornate box. And finally, it's in his possession, the 4-piece dagger set known as Elementarian. Guillermo says he had to jump through a ton of hoops to get his hands on this set, and he was totally floored by the insane price tag for what he assumed were just some decorative knives. But these daggers aren't for show, my friend. They're powerful artifacts humming with some seriously ancient magic. And when Yuri shows off his insane mana manipulation channeling energy into the blades, Guillermo practically has a heart attack on the spot. To mess with the guy even more, Yuri slowly brings the glowing tip of the dagger right up to the man's face, and just holds it there. When he finally pulls the blade away, Guillermo lets out a huge sigh of relief. The prince's control over his mana is just built different. Suddenly, a dark figure zips into the room, quick and silent. Yuri catches the movement in his peripheral vision, but poor Guillermo is totally clueless. The arrival of this shadow is Yuri's cue to send the businessman packing. He tells him he wants a complete report in a few days, on every single detail of how the Empire is preparing for the raid. Once Guillermo is finally out of the room, Yuri slumps onto the couch and calls for someone to come out of the shadows. Slowly, Asana materializes behind him, decked out in her full assassin getup. The first thing he wants to know is whether their little Goryo problem has been handled as he instructed. Asana confirms she delivered a very persuasive warning to that loan shark, leaving a strongly worded message for that bastard to stay in his own lane. Yuri had to step in because that money-grubbing rat kept sniffing around Elaine's fortune. Asana then mentions she overheard the servants on her way in. They were all talking about her boss joining the Union Army. With genuine concern, she urges him to be careful out there. The way she's talking, you'd think he was about to go solo a raid boss all by himself. But that's not going to be an issue because Asana is tagging along for this whole trip. When someone asked if she could handle it, Asana's deadpan look just melted into this gorgeous smile, basically saying anywhere is better than the dump she came from. She's sticking by her master's side even if it means marching into a war zone. A few days later, it was finally time to move out. Before heading off, Crown Prince Cedric went to find his little brother, who was getting his brand new black armor fitted. You could see the worry on his face. All he wanted was for Yuri to promise he'd take care of himself out there. The third prince just laughed it off all cocky. He bragged about being pretty much invincible on the front lines, and that his main goal was to level up the image of the Briole kingdom. Then he flipped the script telling his big bro to chill with all the late-night reading, because his eyesight was getting seriously bad. Right before they said their goodbyes, Cedric gave his little brother a huge hug, really hoping it wouldn't be the last time they'd see each other for a while. Yuri just promised he'd be back before he knew it. The war trumpet suddenly blasted, getting every soldier to snap to attention in front of the platform. King Fiore stood before all his people signaling the start of the departure ceremony. The commander of the army, the kingdom's very own third prince, walked up the carpeted stairs looking like a total boss. Decked out in his shiny new armor, he looked absolutely legendary. Speaking like a dad, Fiore asked his son if he was feeling the pressure. He told the young man to turn around and get a good look at the soldiers he was about to lead into battle. Every single Briole soldier packed into that town square was a precious life that now rested entirely on his shoulders. Keeping it 100, the king admitted that not everyone in this army was going to make it back home alive. However, Yuri is dead set on making sure none of them die a pointless tragic death like in his first life. No cap. For the last time, the king asked his son if he was truly ready to carry such an insane weight of responsibility. But before Yuri could even answer, King Fiore had already bounced from the podium, and the whole vibe in the square turned heavy and hostile. Yuri stared at the man now in front of him and felt this murderous aura so thick and nasty it made his entire body tremble. He was literally frozen in place, his instincts screaming that whatever was walking toward him was out for blood. It was like the Grim Reaper himself decided to show up as this dark avatar raised its blade. Yuri knew instantly that trying to dodge would just lead to an even more messed up ending. Luckily, our boy has never slacked off. He'd been training his mind and body for exactly these kinds of high-stakes situations. Tapping into the ancestors' mana method, he supercharged his core. He needed all the power he could get to fight off the paralyzing fear that was gripping him. He slowly drew his own sword and dropped into a solid defensive stance. But instead of just waiting to get attacked, he decided to set the pace himself, unleashing the soul-severing slash to meet Death's blade head-on. Up on the platform, father and son were locked in a stalemate, their swords clashing. A satisfied grin spread across King Fiore's face. He praised his boy for handling that perfectly. That sword strike, that was Yuri's official permission slip to leave for war. King Fiore isn't the type to drag out ceremonies. His only request was simple: for his son to come back home in one piece. Looking like a total veteran, Yuri Briole turned his attention back to the men he was about to lead. With his sword raised high, our MC looked ready to drag his enemies to the darkest pit of hell, and his soldiers went absolutely wild, chanting his name with a fanatical passion. He told his men to put all their faith in him, as the war banners were hoisted and their blades were drawn. The time had come for the soldiers of Briole to march to the border, but word of Yuri's deployment had already reached a certain someone. Down in the dungeons, a few orcs were being held captive, basically serving as lab rats for some shady research. That someone was Count Seymour, the kingdom's most legendary defender and its first line of defense. And my guy was seriously hyped to finally meet the so-called fated prince after 5 whole years. Later on, they made camp for the night, and our prince was deep in thought, big-braining it over a map. He turns to Sir Raymond and asks for a quick ETA on how much longer they have to travel. The knight explains their route, saying they have to push through the border town, Anguid. Only then will they finally make it to the assembly point over in Balshad. A familiar voice suddenly cuts through the air, and it belongs to the exact scumbag who offed him in his past life. The guy's name is Roland, the oldest son of the Margrave, and he's surprisingly on one knee, acting like a perfect gentleman, and introduces himself with some serious old-school knightly flair. This whole vibe makes our prince low-key uncomfortable, but he gives the dude a nod anyway. The blonde knight then gets all hyped up, saying there's something super personal he's been dying to tell him. While Yuri's sweating bullets, wondering what it could be, Roland starts blushing, like he just met his celebrity crush. Then he just screams that he has an insane amount of respect for the prince. Ever since he heard the story about Yuri helping his servant years ago, he's been a total stan of the prince's knightly code. Our boy needs a hot second to even process that fire hose of over-the-top compliments. He tells the guy he's also heard about him from his dad and says he hopes they can get along. These kind words make Roland practically vibrate with excitement, and with that the crew finally gets moving. Before they roll out though, Sir Raymond gives him a heads up, not to get salty if the Count of Sidor is a total jerk. Apparently the man is famous for having zero chill, but our prince is shook when he sees a massive welcome party waiting. Right outside Sidor Castle, Margrave Jaime himself is there to greet our hero. The Margrave explains that his men are throwing a party for his arrival because no cap he's a living legend, being the youngest commander prince who actually fights on the front. Then out of nowhere, the Margrave asks if he's ever scrapped with an orc, and our boy proudly flexes that he has. That is until his brain reminds him the only one he's seen was in a picture book. He plays it off smooth, saying he'd be honored to learn a thing or two from Sidor's experienced soldiers who've actually slayed orcs. Hearing this, Sir Jaime is impressed and offers to give him a legit welcome present. They go deep underground to a place that looks like a dungeon, where a knight with a grin unlocks a huge cell. Sir Jaime just gestures inside, telling the prince his present is in there, and our boy strolls in confident as ever, leading his crew from the front, but then the heavy door slams shut right behind them. He immediately asks what the old geezer's angle is, but Sir Jaime just tells him it's all good. There's nothing for him to sweat about, as torches light up a path leading to something menacing. They all suddenly ignite, and when Yuri looks around, he and his men can't even process what's standing there, right in front of their shocked faces. He wonders out loud if it's an orc, but Sir Jaime just calls it Prisoner 69. The dude explains he's been using it like a lab rat to learn every single thing about its brutal species. This was all to create new tactics that would be clutch in a fight. Our prince asks if this is the so-called gift, and the old man grins. He says there's no better present, especially since a war is about to pop off. Yuri grins back and thanks him. He really didn't expect Jaime to be unhinged enough to use captured orcs as test dummies. He sees the knight behind him looking nervous and tells the guy Simon to just spit out whatever he's holding back. Simon admits he thinks it's completely insane to use a prisoner of war this way, even if it is just an orc. Hearing that, the prince agrees he's not wrong for feeling that way, then tells Sir Jaime to open the cell door. The orc busts out ready to wreck shop, and Yuri looks at Simon telling him to get some real-world experience. As the giant monster roars and smashes the floor, Simon steps up and gets into his fighting stance. But then the orc just faceplants on the ground a second later. Simon just stares completely confused. He turns and says again that it's messed up to fight a captured orc that clearly gave up the will to live a long time ago, but that tiny opening lets the orc clock him right in the head and probably cause some serious brain damage. The other knights freak out as the orc violently chokes Simon with its absolutely massive bicep. It's clearly using him as a human shield. A voice cries out for our boy to save the knight, while Sir Jaime says it's fine, saying the orc is already super weak. The beast just starts barking out some weird gibberish. It's still got the knight locked down tight like it knows exactly what a hostage is. Our hero is totally caught off guard. He's shocked the monster is smart enough to take a hostage. Sir Jaime then says he'll go find a translator. Just then, a hooded figure peeks out from behind a wall, and Sir Jaime immediately tells them to get over here. Yuri's looking confused AF, but the hooded person named Corey starts translating as the orc growls. The man explains that the monster is threatening to unalive the knight if he isn't released, and he's not bluffing. The orc yanks the knight's arm so hard it makes him scream, which is our hero's cue to call Hernando to the front. Without wasting a second, the mage whips up a spell in his palm and fires off a binding blast. It wraps around the orc, catching the beast completely off guard, and Yuri gives the signal for our boy to rush in. He rips the knight free, making the orc roar with fury before turning to Sir Jaime and asking if this is some kind of special edition orc. The Margrave confirms it, saying this one is unusually intelligent. He explains that when they first managed to capture the creature, it was snacking on knights like they were a bag of gummy bears, which totally enrages one of the knights, who charges in demanding to kill it. But our hero tells the guy to take a chill pill, adding that he isn't stopping him, just to be merciful. He then gestures towards something lurking behind the orc. The trapped monsters in the cages behind them are all giving the knights the ultimate death stare. They look like they're ready to go absolutely feral the second they get an opening, and Yuri warns the men. He tells them the real battlefield is going to be way more brutal than this. This is just the tutorial mode. A short time later, 3 knights are squared up against a handful of orcs. One of the monsters swings a torch trying to get an edge, but Hernando easily claps back with a mana shield, while another knight drops his opponent. He stands victorious over the body, and our boy gives him a proud round of applause, but the knights themselves look more grim than ever. Yuri gets that it doesn't feel right since the orcs are basically defenseless, but he insists the knights need every ounce of training. Sir Jaime admits this whole inhumane practice seriously clashes with their code of honor as knights. But then he coldly says that monsters like these don't deserve any mercy, leading them further down a hall, and explaining the orcs they saw were nothing. They were just empty husks. He continues saying that in the real orc camps, prisoners are forced to endure some truly unspeakable things. He stops at a heavy door and warns them that the result of those acts is waiting inside, and when the knights peek into the room, everyone's jaws just hit the floor. Standing right there are half-orcs. Yuri, however, doesn't even flinch. His only comment is that their numbers are way higher than he anticipated. Sir Jaime grimly explains that orcs capture humans and breed them, which is how these abominations are created. Our hero looks at the old man and asks him if he hates the orcs. Without a shred of hesitation, Sir Jaime says he hates them with every fiber of his being and won't rest until every last one is 6 feet under. Our MC notices the man's ice-cold tone and thinks to himself that everyone has an arch-nemesis. For Sir Jaime, his entire reason for living is to wipe every single orc off the face of the planet. And that hits different when you find out he once discovered his own son's body in one of their villages. That grief and rage haven't faded from his eyes one bit. The next morning, Yuri is standing on a cliff watching the sunrise when Sir Jaime approaches him. He asks the prince to take a man named Cory along on his mission, and our boy remembers him as the translator from yesterday. He smiles and gives the guy props for being able to speak the orc language. Yuri says that skill is incredibly useful, but when Cory tries to explain something, our hero cuts him off. He says he already knows what's up, and tosses him a gauntlet, which totally shocks the half-orc, before telling him to stop stressing and just grind hard. Cory protests, insisting he can't accept such a pricey gift, but Yuri just shuts him down and calls for Raymond. He asks the knight if they're getting close to the border, and Raymond confirms it, adding that monster hordes are pretty rare in this area. Yuri isn't having it. He warns the guy not to get comfortable just because they're near the border. Monster hordes are still a major threat, and their entire mission is to wipe every last one of them out. Meanwhile, the scene cuts over to a merchant caravan trying to make its way through the wilderness. The travelers are all looking around super nervously with a feeling that something is definitely wrong. And what do you know, a bunch of armed riders suddenly appear. They charge straight for them with their swords drawn, and their leader doesn't waste a single second swinging down and savagely slicing right through the merchants. In a matter of seconds, the ground is painted red, as the whole situation devolves into a total bloodbath. Then we snap right back to the prince riding his horse. Looking over his shoulder, he thinks it would be a massive headache if anyone discovered Cory is a half-orc. Still, since he left the kid with Hernando, it shouldn't be a problem, for now at least. He then glances down at the map in his hand and calls out to Jared. He informs the knight that he's been promoted to scout duty, which immediately makes Jared's face go pale, especially with monsters crawling all over the area. Jared tries to argue back, saying the monsters usually scatter the second their units get close, but the prince completely shuts him down. Yuri's basically like, bruh, we have to deal with them sooner or later, and then he immediately starts messing with him. He asks if Jared's too scared to handle the job, and the poor knight just stands there silently taking one verbal jab after another from the prince. Finally, after getting clowned on enough, he gets pissed and storms off to get the mission done. This, of course, brings a victorious smile to our hero's face. Riding up next to him, Sir Raymond points out that the prince seems to be giving Jared some special treatment. Our boy just casually replies that he really enjoys messing with the guy. Switching gears, the prince asks Raymond a question. He wants to know why Raymond even joined the war. Raymond admits it's been a hot minute since anyone's asked, but his answer has never changed. He declares no cap that he fights only for the safety of Brielle, which actually gets a faint smile out of Yuri. The prince then puts him in charge of the unit, telling him he wants to go check on Jared himself. And with that, he gallops ahead on his horse. It doesn't take long for him to stumble upon a camp and snatch up a hooded figure lurking on the outskirts. Our hero warns his new prisoner to keep his mouth shut. Unless, of course, he's got a death wish. Just then, Jared calls out that he's found exactly what they were looking for. Pointing toward the camp just ahead, he explains that it's a bandit hideout. The prince assumes their new friend is just a patrolman, though he finds it kinda sus that a leader would send out a single dude. Shaking in his boots, the bandit insists that's exactly right, claiming he's just some low-level nobody. Suddenly, a bright red stone dangling from the man's neck grabs the prince's attention. Snatching the necklace, Yuri demands to know what it is. The bandit explains their boss orders them to wear it. Specifically, they have to wear it anytime they go out on patrol. Drawing his sword, the prince asks what kind of spell is enchanted on the artifact. The bandit swears he doesn't have a clue, so our hero decides to let it go for now. Turning around, he makes a bold statement. He'll just go capture the bandit leader himself and drag the truth out of the guy personally. A couple of hours go by, and as the sun starts to set, the two are still on scouting duty when Jared suddenly calls out that he spotted something. He reports that their main troops are in position, and a few scouts have already been sent out. The prince then asks a pretty wild question. He wants to know if the knights can handle the rest of the thugs after he goes absolutely berserk on them. The question makes Jared completely freeze up. He's totally caught off guard, but Yuri doesn't give him any more details. Instead, he just tells him to hurry up if he wants to rack up his own body count, and with that he speeds off. Jared starts shouting for him to wait, saying it's too dangerous to go alone, but our hero couldn't care less. He just barks the order to advance as he charges to the front. Meanwhile, the bandits inside hear all the noise and start wondering what the hell is happening. Looking up, they see their sunlight get blocked by a shadow just before the prince comes crashing down on them. They're too stunned to even react. They just freeze. Our hero greets them with nothing more than a sweet, innocent smile. By the time the sun has fully set, the knights finally show up to the camp. There they find the prince just chilling comfortably by a small campfire. He's sitting right in the middle of a field of dead bodies, and he taunts them, joking that they sure took their sweet time getting here. While trying to catch his breath, Jared scolds him for pulling such a reckless stunt, but Yuri just fires right back. He says they should have been right on his tail. He then turns to Raymond and asks for a report, and Raymond confirms that the stragglers have all been handled. More importantly, not a single knight was lost. In high spirits, the prince orders his men to gather up some meat. He tells them to grab supplies and get ready to cook dinner, declaring that mystery meat on a stick is on the menu for tonight. Jared groans that the gamey smell is going to be awful, but Yuri just smirks and tells him he simply doesn't know how to appreciate a true delicacy. As they're talking about setting up camp, one of the bandits who is playing dead starts to get up, and Raymond quickly informs the prince that their next stop is a place called GID. But they're warned they might just bump into another army there. With zero chill, our hero kicks a barely conscious bandit and asks which country they'll be running into. Raymond's vibe turns grim as he tells him it might be the Holy Kingdom. Yuri points out the obvious, saying, "Aren't those the guys with the insane healing magic?" Raymond advises him to play nice since they'll need those healers for their own soldiers later on. He then mentions that he remembers who's in charge of their forces. And this time, it's none other than a young princess. Low-key, the word on the street is that she's about to get booted from the line of succession. That's why she's absolutely desperate to get a win. Hearing this makes Yuri start plotting, and Raymond can tell. He asks if Yuri wants the knights to do some digging, but our MC just says there's no need, he'll ask the princess directly. GID is the central checkpoint for all allied forces on their way to Balshad, even though the whole point of the place was to be a supply hub. This place is totally off the grid, and what the locals say goes. Right before they roll into town, our MC tells Raymond to get his troops in line, warning them not to act up once they're inside. We then cut to the Lord of GID, who's all smiles as he welcomes the prince. They clasp hands while Yuri thanks him for GID's backup, which just makes the Lord chuckle. He starts reminiscing about how Fiore Briole used to absolutely wreck orcs back in his prime. Our boy vows he's gonna live up to that legendary family rep. Just then a butler hustles in to whisper some news, and the Lord immediately makes an announcement. Apparently the princess has just arrived, and he asks if the prince wants an introduction. Yuri's down for it, and a moment later, the holy princess herself enters the room. After the Lord greets her, she marches in rocking a full set of shining armor. With a squad of guards at her back, she gives a super formal intro, and the Lord replies that it's a privilege to have her. But the second she locks eyes with Yuri, she gives a major side-eye, and with zero chill asks if he's one of the servants. That jab completely catches Yuri off guard, and before anyone can even react, she tells him to make himself scarce.